Hello, good evening, and good day, everybody, and welcome to the Ask Abhijit show. This is episode 361. I hope you're all doing great. Today, I'm going to take questions, first of all, from the questions that you've asked in the comments. I'll take a bunch of those over the next couple of hours. And then, if there are super chats or the other questions, I will take some of those or as many of those as possible after the first 2 hours. So that's what we're going to do. And the questions I've selected from the comments, they're about history. It's about Indian history, world history, all of that. So we will address those first. Before we get into the questions, let me see who all is there on the live chat. I can see Darshan Patel from Rajpipla, Gujarat. Bonsoir, monsieur. E.R. Dhruv Shah, Geopolitical Dubey from Indore. Good evening, sir. Good to have you. Ashwini Sharma, Shubh Sandhya ji. Ashwini Sharma is from Bihar. Abhishek Shukla live is here from Kanpur. Thank you very much, sir. Good evening. Harish, you are one. Rekha Humble, Jai Shri Ram, ma'am. Who else do we have? Safed Booth 67 is here. Ayush Singh, good evening, sir. Pranam sir ji. Ameya Tulpule, bonjour, monsieur. Really love Miss Patel. Namaste ji. Animals for Laugh is here from Mumbai. Good evening to you, sir. Mahita Bushetti, hello, good evening, ma'am, or good day, ma'am, wherever you are. Good night, I suppose. Okay. Sumit is here. Sumit here. Good evening. Kahan is from Saket, New Delhi. Good evening to you, sir. Shri Hari Arjun from Bangalore. Hail Rudraji. GK87. Namaste. Namaste. Wise idiot. Hello. Hello. Chandani Priya. Good evening, ma'am. Nirvana Shanks is still reading The War That Ended Peace. Fantastic. Good to see you. Améa Tulpoulet, je vous souhaite une excellente soirée et pour nous, une soirée pleine de nouvelles informations. Oui, merci beaucoup. J'espère que c'est comme ça. Rahul Danake, namaskar. Namaskar, Sarji. Dhruv Duria, once again, good evening. Vench Acharya, privyet, sir. Vench Acharya is watching from Karnavati in Gujarat. Karnavati in Gujarat. Crazy Brain, good to see you. Good to see you. Om Bekerikar, hello. Mahita Bushetti once again. Shri Hari Arjun, Aryan Musk, hello. Amayatul Pule, Kahan, Mr. Jam, Radhe Radhe. Who else do we have? Mr. Jam is here. Angad Singh Oberoi, hello. Dhruv Duria, hello. Good evening. Courageous Servant. Courageous Servant. I would say the Talwar and the Khatana. Yeah. Who else? Rahul Himthani is here from Mumbai. Namaste, sir. Namaste, Kahan. Once again, Random Skull, hello. Good evening. Khushbu Art, hello, ma'am. Manisha Cardoso, namaste. Namaste, ma'am. HRDK Talwar, namaste. Rishabh Chaudhary, hello. Angad Singh Operoi is also here. Yes. X Gamer Z8537, hello. Who else? Who else? Purvita, namaskar. Namaskar, good to see you, ma'am. Kahan has seen my podcast. I'm glad you did. Harshay, good evening. Vijay Waghela, good morning. Good morning, Vijay Bhai. Polynomial. History session, let's go. Yes, indeed, let's go. Abhinav Chauhan. Rahul. Saptarshi Chakrabarti is here from Meghalaya, from Shillong in Meghalaya. Good evening to you, sir. Good evening. Who else? Rahul Dunake here. Thank you, sir. Team Talks 27. Hello, hello. Yes, Hensi Penguin, good evening. Good to see you. Hensi Penguin would like a new intro, a geostrategy style intro. How about that? Well, we could do that. Yes, indeed. Ankit is here from London. Ram Ram. Ram Ram Bhai. Who else? Harish, you are one. Yes, once again. Karan Nalawat, Jai Shri Ramji. Yes, real Vladimir Putin. Ram Ram sir. Mahita Bushetti is now in the UK, so it's afternoon there. All right, good afternoon to you. Rishi Somani, good evening. Rishi Somani, yes. Satyam Chaudhary, hello. And so many other people. I won't be able to greet you all individually, but good to have you all. Unapologetic Sanatani, namaste. Sujit Shanagonda, namaskaram. Reflex, maybe. Radhe Krishna. 257 Bhanu is here from Boston. Good morning. Good morning, I suppose. Yes. Good morning. Boston. Yes. East Coast. Jagdish Mali, hello. And Kanishk is here. Tejas is here. VM Pandey, Shivraj, Yadav, Damram, Katana, Harshay, yes. And everybody else. Okay. So let's get going with some questions. Let's take some questions. What are the questions that I've picked up? Sonakshi is here from Jalandhar. Thank you, ma'am. Good evening. Brave Robot is here. UFC White House. Okay. Sanjay Uprethi is also here. Thank you for watching the podcast with Neha, ma'am. Yes, thank you. Okay, let's get going with some questions. Let's take some questions. I'll take questions as many as I can the next 2 hours from the comments, and then we'll take some live chat and super chat questions. And tomorrow we're gonna have a full super chat question as well. So, what are the questions? Where shall we begin? Let's begin here. This is by Amisha Mishra, and the question is: a so-called foreign historian, Audrey Trushki, who is obsessed with Aurangzeb, now claims that Pashupati seals are not proto-Shiva, it's proto-Elamite iconography. That's what she claims. Elephants, water buffaloes, and rhinoceroses are not native to ancient Elam. They are native to India. They're native to Bharatvarsha. And now Pakistanis are claiming this is Pakistani history. Civilizations don't map to modern borders. What is my take on this? So what Amisha says is that civilizations don't map to modern borders. Today you have modern political borders. The borders of the subcontinent are artificially drawn. We know that very well. The Indian subcontinent. There was no Pakistan before 1947, right? Pakistan is an artificial temporary nation that was created in 1947. So civilizations, the ancient Indian civilization certainly does not map to modern borders in the subcontinent. The whole of the subcontinent was home to Indian civilization, right? You had Gandhar several thousand years ago. Today, that region is called Afghanistan. Right? That's historical Gandhar. And there was no Pakistan, by the way. There was no Pakistan. There was no Bangladesh. That was part of Angadesh, right? Angadesh, Vangadesh, and so on. So today's borders are irrelevant from a civilizational perspective. Now, what is Elam? What's Elam? And what's this proto-Elamite iconography? So Elam was this region that was Eastern Persia and parts of modern-day Balochistan. Okay? That is historical Elam. So the Elamite civilization, so to say. Okay, so let's take a look at Google. What Google says: the borders of roughly the region of ancient Elam, Elam, Elam. So yeah, this is essentially what ancient Elam is. If you look at the map, okay, this is tiny. So this here is Elam. It's west of the Strait of Hormuz. Okay. It's even west of Marhashi, essentially. What is this here? Babylonia, Assyria, Elam. Okay, so this is Elam. It's west of the Strait of Hormuz and part of present-day Persia, Iran, right? That's Elam. Now, obviously, India and Persia, we have ancient historical civilizational ties going back to the very beginning, to the very dawn of Persian civilization. We know that. That's I think that everyone hopefully knows by now, right? Ancient Persia, Aryan Persia. That's an offshoot of Aryavart. Ancient India, ancient Bharatvarsh, Indian civilization. Now, before the Achaemenid dynasty, you had a different dynasty of which you had kings like Uvakshatra and so on. The Median dynasty. So that also was, you could say, part of our civilization or a civilization offshoot. So Elam is that region west of the Strait of Hormuz, part of present-day Iran, Persia, whatever you want to call it. Now, did you have elephants and tigers and water buffaloes and rhinoceroses in Elam? Do we have them today? Did we have them in the past? We do not have them today, and we did not have them in the past over there. For example, if you look at the history, the deeper history of the Indian subcontinent, then you'll find that you had ostriches in India, and you had hippopotamuses in India, like 20, 30,000 years ago. And those animals went extinct. But we are talking about the history of the past 10,000 or so years right now. 10,000 years before present, that and until today. That's the time period we're talking about. So there is this great, very famous seal, the Pashupati seal from the Saraswati Sindhu phase of our history, right? What is it? Let's see. Pashupati seal. So it's a very famous seal. We know what it looks like, right? This is the one. Here it is. And you have tigers, elephants, water buffaloes, etc. Rhinoceros as well. None of which existed ever or still exist in what is what was historically Elam. So it's clearly, Indian subcontinental animals. And if you look at the yogic pose, it's I think the Mula Bandhasan or whatever it is, right? So this is obviously Proto Shiva. Now, this individual, this person, Audrey Trushke, she has gone ahead and claimed that this is a Proto-Elamite kind of iconography. It's nothing to do with India. What's really funny? Whenever you have a gap in understanding, let's say, Egyptian history, historians fill that gap using Egyptian culture as a reference point. So any gap in Egyptian history is explained or filled within the context of Egyptian culture and civilization. Whatever gaps exist, those gaps are explained using Egyptian culture and his civilization. If there's a gap in, let's say, Greek history, or there's a mystery in Greek history, you're going to explain the mystery using the context and perspective of Egyptian, of Greek culture and civilization. Let's say you find some new carving, and you're not quite sure what it is. You're going to try and explain it in using the context and the perspective of Greek civilization and culture. But whenever there's a gap, let's say hypothetically in Indian history, these historians, foreign and Indian, try and explain it using foreign foreign cultures. So everything in India allegedly comes from outside. That's what they try to claim. Now, this individual, Audrey Trushke, she is a great fan of the Mughals. She's written a book about, I don't know, whatever, Aurangzeb or whatever it is, right? And she is apparently a historian, an American historian. She's a Jewish person, and she has family ties with the Christian missionaries. She clearly despises India. She despises Indian culture and civilization. Clearly, she tries to ascribe foreign origins to everything that's Indian. She tries to deny the greatness and antiquity of Indian culture and civilization. Right? And she tries to claim that whatever good may exist in India, it exists in India because it was brought in by outsiders. That's her perspective. That's always been her perspective. So what's my take? My take is, why do we even bother talking about this person? Ideally, I would not even take this question, but because it's right now a big deal and everyone's outraging about this, so I thought let's throw some light on this. She's not the only person who does this. There's plenty of these Western Indologists. Oh, what's her name? Wendy Doniger. You must have heard of Wendy Doniger. She's written a book called The Hindus. Okay, let's Google this individual. Wendy Doniger. Okay, she's like a lady in her 80s. She's a historian, allegedly. And if you see the kind of books she has written, The Hindus and Alternative History, The Origins of Evil in Hindu Mythology, Redeeming the Kama Sutra, The Dharma of Unfaithful Wives, and the most infamous of her texts is The Hindus and Alternative History. This book actually should be called Hinduism from an Abrahamic Perspective. Okay? An alternative to the narrative of Hindu history and what they tell. So these people try to deconstruct and distort Indian history. And this person, Wendy Doniger, just like Audrey Trushke, is a Jewish person. I'm not sure if this Wendy Doniger person has any connections with Christian missionaries or not, but she is probably a mentor of this person. What's his name? The mythologist Patnaik. Right. So you have this entire cabal of historians and distortionists, etc., whose entire objective, the purpose of whose life is to distort Indian history and to deny, Indian history itself, the antiquity of Indian history, of Indian civilization, and so on. And the more we discuss them, the more we give them prominence. We should ignore these people. Why do we care what somebody from the US says about our history? I mean, if the Westerners have tried this with China as well. The Chinese simply ignore what the West says. The Chinese say that what the West says and what these Western historians say, it's irrelevant. What the Chinese say about China is what matters. The West is irrelevant. And that's why, because the Chinese have had this very clear approach and very clear policy of completely ignoring what the West says about China. That's why Chinese history today, it is now, the mainstream Chinese history is the Chinese history that's presented by Chinese historians, not by Western historians. But in India, we have this inferiority complex, and we put too much emphasis and too much importance to what individuals like Trotsky say. That's a sign of an inferiority complex. We should simply ignore these people. What do we care what they say? How do we care what they say? How does it matter to us? Why do we continually seek Western validation? And when the West says something that is incorrect, we feel all upset and sad and outraged. How should we care? So my point is, this person is irrelevant. Whatever she says, we should simply disregard it. Okay? And if she is relevant, it's because we are making her relevant. Ignore people like this Trotsky and Wendy Doniger and Michael Witzel and whoever else. There's plenty of these people. A lot of them are brown sepoys. Am I being racist here? Veer Das? Am I being racist by calling Indian slave-minded individuals, by calling them brown sepoys? Can you be racist towards yourself, towards your own ethnicity? Utter nonsense. Low IQ, if you claim that. So, the Pashupati seal is obviously, it's very clearly an ancient depiction of Lord Shiva. That's what it is. And I don't give a damn what Wendy Doniger or O.D. Trotsky or whoever else says whatever. I don't care what they say. To me, those people are irrelevant. To me, I don't respect Audrey Trotsky. I don't pay any attention to anything she may have to say, because I know she has a narrative to peddle. She has an agenda, right? She's an enemy of Indian civilization. Why do we give such people any importance? This is a problem with the Indian psyche. This is the Indian inferiority complex. It's the Indian slave-minded psychological issue, right? We need to get over this. We need to ignore people like Trotsky. We need to ignore people like whoever else, Wendy Doniger and whoever else. There's plenty of these people, including a whole bunch of brown coolies, Indians, who serve the foreign master. Ignore them all. That's it. Real Vladimir Putin says, did ancient Indians use the term Vishwaguru to dignify themselves? Or is it a modern term frequently used by Indians? Well, as far as I know, our ancestors did not use this term Vishwaguru. Our ancestors did not have an inferiority complex. Our ancient Indians used terms like Jagat Guru, for example, for especially distinguished scholars and religious leaders. For example, Adi Shankaracharya. He is called Jagat Guru Adi Shankaracharya, right? So that's one person who was called Jagat Guru, the civilizer of the world, the guru of the world, essentially, the most learned person ever, that sort of thing. We never use the term Vishwaguru to talk about Bharatvarsh, to talk about India or Indian civilization. Right? We never use the term. Our ancestors never used the term. It's a pretty new term. I think it's a 20th century, late 20th century invention. That India was the Vishwaguru and we should be Vishwaguru again. This is it's a level of cope, because we have dragged our standards down so low today that we feel the need to invent, glorious sounding terms to make ourselves feel good, that we were Vishwaguru and we will be Vishwaguru again, and we should be Vishwaguru. First, learn how to be a Vishwa student today. Your education system is trash. I mean, see all the scams that are emerging out of God knows where in the Indian education system. Is that how you become Vishwaguru? We're not going to be Vishwaguru unless we clean up the alleged corruption and all the whatever rot exists in the Indian education system. We won't be Vishwaguru unless we totally thoroughly reform the education system. And the new education policy is not that reform. It's a joke. So it's a newfangled term. Probably, the last half of the 20th century, that's around the time when this term emerges from wherever. Vishwaguru. Vishwaguru. Ancient Indians never called India Vishwaguru. Never. Even though we were the civilization that invented education, systematic education. Right? We had people from all over the civilized world and seeking to be civilized world who would travel to India at great risk to their lives and seek knowledge and wisdom from our universities, right? So we actually were the birthplace of education and the most enlightened, the most educated civilization on the planet. We invented systematic education. We invented multi-tier education from the grassroots level all the way to the university level. We invented that, and the rest of the world copied it. And today they are way ahead of us, right? And we have now mass-produced, mass-emulated, or an inferior 19th century colonial version of education. So it's a modern term used by Indians. Ancient Indians, our ancestors, did not use this term Vishwaguru to dignify themselves. They did not feel the need to dignify themselves. What are the terms that were used for India, for Bharatvarsh? Bharatvarsh was one, Jambudvip was another, Aryavarth was another. Aryavarth means the land of the Arya people, the noble people. We were all noble, not by ethnicity, but by behavior. It means civilized. We were civilized, right? So those are the terms our ancestors used. They never used the term Vishwaguru. This Vishwaguru term is a late 20th century cope. We're trying to cope with the low standards by inventing glorious terms for our past. That's what it is. Yeah. Khadim Ali Shah says, "Dear sir, if Pashtuns were living in Gandhar, then the script of Gandhara language was Kharoshti and the language was Prakrit." Yes, various Prakrit languages. Then how our script today is Arabic/Persian and our language is Eastern Iranian? It's an Indo-European language. Please clarify. Great question. So when we talk about Gandhar, we're talking about the region that is now Afghanistan. It's now called Afghanistan. Historically, it was called Gandhar, which included parts of present-day northern Pakistan. Okay, so parts of northern-day Pakistan and present-day Afghanistan, that is historical Gandhara. And roughly two and a half millennia ago, Ashok, a young Prince Ashok, was the governor of Gandhar, right? And he eventually became emperor of Bharatvarsh. So Gandhara was, I mean, there's no denying the fact that Gandhara was an integral part of Indian civilization, and it was part of the extended population of the Indian subcontinent, the people of Gandhara. And we see plenty of that. I mean, archaeologically, you clearly see evidence of Indian culture all over the place, including all the way into Central Asia. So that's Gandhara. Now, 1,000 years ago is when things change. Around 1000 AD, you could say. Roughly, give or take a century. That's when the first Turkic invasions happen in northwest India, it starts in Gandhar. And about 1000 AD onwards, the Turks capture, conquer, and hold Gandhar. And they start the process of mass conversions and massacres and all that. So before this process happened, the people of Gandhar, they were Hindus and Buddhists. You had the Hindu Shahi dynasty. You had the Turk Shahi dynasty, and so on. And these dynasties were Hunnik or Turkic dynasties that were Indian, that were Hindu. Okay, it doesn't mean that everyone who lived there was Turkic. It means that the people who ruled, the rulers, were of Turkic origin, but they were Hindus, and they fought and defended India against the invading Turks for a couple of centuries. So Turks defending India from Turks, that was the situation. Okay, but the people of Gandhar were of Indian origin. The Pashtuns today, who live there today, are actually, if you look at them genetically, of Indian origin. They are an extension of the northern Indian population. That's what they are. Genetically, they are Indian. Okay, the further north you go in India, the people get fairer in skin and all that. You get that. Okay, right? But genetically, they're Indian. About the language. So you had the Gandhari language. You had various Prakrit languages. The scripts were Kharoshti, Brahmi, etc. 2000 plus years ago, you had Kharoshti, whatever it was. You had Brahmi, various Brahmic scripts, right? The Gandharan Prakrit language was spoken there. It was also spoken in Gosthana or Khotan. When you had the transmission of Indian civilization eastwards into China, a lot of the scholars who went to China were of Gandharan and Kashmiri origin, right? Especially during the time of the Kushan Empire, beginning with the with the initiatives of Emperor Kanishka the Great, and later during the Gupta Empire as well. You had plenty of Gandharan and Kashmiri origin scholars who traveled to China and spread our civilization there, culture, religions, and so on. Right? So that's the history. 1,000 years ago, it was said that the people who lived in Gandhara, they which city was it? I forget which city it was, but a lot of them would be classified today as Rajputs. The term Rajput emerged later, but Rajput essentially means people who were descended from ancient royal families. Yeah. So now about once again coming to your question, the Gandhara language, and the languages, right? So today, if you look at Afghanistan, the script that is used is the Persian script. Okay, and the Persian script is a derivative of the Arabic script with a few changes. For example, in Arabic, you don't have the sound pa. In Arabic, they say ba. They don't say pa. They don't know how to say pa. But in Persian, there is a pa. In Arabic, there is no je. But in Persian, there is a je, etc. So the Persian script is a slight modification of the Arabic script, and that's used for Pashto and so on. So that's the main script that's used in Afghanistan today. And the language. So what are the language spoken? What are the languages? What are the native indigenous languages spoken in Afghanistan? So you have foreign languages in Afghanistan, like Uzbek, like Turkmen, like Kyrgyz, etc. You have some foreign languages, Turkic languages, but the native language is Pashto. And another major language is Dari, which is Afghan Persian, you could say. So what language families do these fall under? If you ask Wikipedia, they will say that Pashto is an Iranian language. Okay? They will say Pashto is an Iranian language. But if you speak Pashto, you will know that there are certain sounds in Pashto that simply don't exist in any Iranian Persian language. Okay? In Pashto, you have retroflex sounds. A retroflex sound is when the tip of your tongue touches the top of your mouth, up there, the top of your palate. Okay, what sounds? Ta, ta, da, da, na, ra. These are retroflex sounds. And no Persian language has retroflex sounds, but every Indian language has retroflex sounds. Ta, ta, da, da, na, ra. These ones. Pashto has these sounds. No Persian language has these sounds. That indicates that Pashto is the descendant of an ancient Indian language. Which language? One of the ancient Gandharan Prakrits. That's what Pashto is. If you pay attention to Pashto, if you're Indian, if you understand Indian languages, if you pay close attention to Pashto, you will understand some of it at least. It's not that hard to understand at least some of Pashto. Pashto is an Indian language, but it is classified by linguists as an Eastern Iranic language or something. Okay, so the language actually is an Indian language, and the retroflex sounds are a dead giveaway of that. There is no Iranian language that has retroflex sounds apart from Balochi, which is not Iranian. Balochi is classified as an Indo-Aryan language, I suppose, but not Pashto for some reason. Now, the script is Arabic/Persian, like you say, correct. So, how do we explain that? How did that happen? Why don't they use a Brahmic script today? Why? Because Gandhara was invaded and conquered by Turks who imposed their religion and their systems and everything of theirs on the people forcibly. Forcibly. There was a tremendous amount of bloodshed. The locals did resist as far as they could, and then they gave in to survive. Right? So it was imposed. This foreign script was imposed upon Gandhara the same way it was imposed upon Persia. Do you think the Persian script, which is the derivative of the Arabic script, do you think it is a native Persian script? No, it was imposed upon the people of Persia. The Persians had their own script, cuneiform. And later, whatever it was never an Arabic derived script. It was forcibly imposed upon the people of Persia, the Arabic script. And then they eventually modified it and made it what is now called Persian. And then that was imposed upon the people of Gandhar. If you look at India today, if you travel across India, a lot of the signs in India are in the Latin script, which is the script that's used to write the English language, as you can see down here. This here is the Latin script. A lot of the signs in India today are in the Latin script. Maybe in 100 years, the only script that will be used if India becomes totally enslaved mentally is going to be the Latin script. So then how do we explain that India, in 100 years, India only has the Latin script? What happened to the Prakrit languages and the Brahmic scripts like Devanagari and whatnot? What happened to those? How do we explain? It's a process of change. It's a process of foreign imposition. The imposition of foreign language, foreign culture, foreign script, foreign religion. So that's how we explain the changes that have happened in Gandhar in the past 1,000 years. Almost everything that is native has been destroyed in Gandhar. The native culture has been destroyed. The indigenous religions have been destroyed. Even the indigenous way of dressing has been destroyed. Historically, Afghan women wore very colorful dresses that were very similar to dresses that ladies wear in Rajasthan and northern India. Today, Afghan women don't quite wear those dresses, sadly. Right? That's changed. That's foreign imposition. Okay? What do you see today of the indigenous Afghan culture? You still have the language, Pashto, that still retains the original Indian sounds. You have that. You have the Attan dance, which is very similar to certain Indian dances. Essentially the same dance, even the beats are the same. So you have that. And I'm not sure what else remains of the original indigenous culture of Gandhar in Afghanistan. You have the genetics, of course. But even the genetics are diluted because of so many foreigners settling down in Afghanistan. The Uzbeks, the Turkmens, the Kyrgyz, Hazaras, etc. Tajiks, I would say, are still fine because they are anyway Indo-Iranian, but the others, they're Turks. So that's how a lot has changed in Gandhara, in Afghanistan. Okay, Imperial Bharat says, is it right to assume that the Americas were totally isolated from the rest of the world before the occupation of barbaric monsters, also known as the English? Is there any evidence of interactions of the Native Americans with the rest of humans before that? So, for a long time, for the longest time, it's been historians have tried to, maintain a certain narrative of the peopling of the Americas. The narrative is that before about 1300 BC or whenever, there were no humans in the Americas, North America, Central America, South America, nothing. It was virgin land like this, a pristine territory, untouched by humans. And then you had the influx of humans through the Bering Strait, the Aleutian Strait, that region, because of the last ice age when the whole passage was iced. It was frozen, so humans could simply walk. Let's see the map, right? Let's take a look at the map. Where is map? Let me show you the map. So if you look at the map of the world, we have, you see, North America and Eurasia are not really far away from each other, right? You have the two Diomede Islands here, Little Diomede and Big Diomede, okay? And this region is called the Bering Strait. Bering Strait. What's the distance? Let's see, between Alaska and Russia, roughly. It's less than 100 kilometers. So during the last glacial minimum, whatever you want to call it, last glacial minimum, this thing was frozen over, and humans from Eurasia could simply walk into Alaska. And then it is said that they took some time to go further down south because of gigantic ice sheets and glaciers. And eventually humans, they were able to break through and reach the continental North American region. Then they slowly made their way down south and eventually reached the southernmost tip of the Americas. So that's the story. And the oldest culture is supposed to be Clovis culture that you find in that's been discovered wherever. It's southern United States or whatever, Clovis culture, which is about, I don't know, 11 to 13,000 years before today. That's the overall narrative that has been constructed. Now, there is evidence that has recently, in the past few years or decades, been discovered in South America of a human presence that dates back more than 100,000 years. That totally upends these claims that before 13,000 years before today, there were no human beings. So even the Native Americans are only recent migrants, which justifies European migration to the Americas, right? Because even the natives are recent migrants. So even the Europeans came recently. What's the big deal? So that justifies European colonization and occupation of the land, that sort of thing. But the truth is that, and then you have the Olmec heads that don't look Eastern Asian, they look African. Okay, the Olmec heads. Let me show the Olmec heads. What are these gigantic, ginormous Olmec heads? OLMEC heads. Okay, if you look at the features of these carved faces, they are definitely not Eastern Asian, right? They look distinctively Africanish, right? They don't have Eastern Asian features. Okay, so we don't even know when these were carved. They found in Mesoamerica, Central America, Mexico, that sort of region, roughly. So that again raises questions about, did Africans actually cross the Atlantic and reach the Americas? So big questions. I think the old narratives that the Europeans, tightly controlled and insisted on, they are now, being more and more questioned because of evidence. If you find evidence of human settlements in South America, which date back more than 100,000 years, then this Clovis first thing just vanishes, it disappears, right? It's no longer relevant. Now the question that you are talking about. So let's say, hypothetically, that humans reached the Americas 100,000 years ago. Or let's say it's just 13,000 years, whatever it is. Let's say it's just 13,000 years ago that humans first reached the Americas and they settled across the Americas. Was there no contact until let's say Columbus, Cristobal Colon, stumbled into the Americas, and he imagined it was India because he was looking for India. That is 1492. So before 1492, was there no contact with anybody else, is the question. And the answer is no, there was contact. We know for a fact there was contact. Okay. So about 1000 AD, roughly, roughly, give or take. Okay, I don't remember the exact dates. You can look it up. I've spoken about that in great detail in the past. So roughly around 1000 AD, okay, around the time that Gandhara was being taken over by the Turks, around that time there was this Norwegian Nordic explorer, Viking explorer, whose name was Eric the Red. So he discovered he discovered Greenland, didn't he? I think no, he did not discover Greenland. He first saw the coastline of North America. The Vikings were great seafarers, and Eric the Red, on a voyage into the Atlantic, maybe he got lost or whatever, but he saw the coastline of North America. But he decided to go back because he was way too far from his homeland. So he decided to go back. Eric the Red. Then his son, Leif Erikson, he said, I'm going to follow in my father's footsteps. And he goes on an expedition all the way west. And he actually ventures on the land, on the coast of North America. And he sets up a settlement there. And then he had a bunch of siblings, okay? Leif Erikson, Thorvald, Thorgrim, and Freydis, his sister, crazy sister, Freydis. So they all went on various expeditions to North America. They set up settlements there. They encountered natives there. They called them Skrylings. And there were clashes and so on. Eventually, they were all killed. I think it was Thorvald or Thorgrim who was killed off. And then his sister marries, who does she marry? Bjarni. Okay, whoever her husband was, famous guy. And she marries him and she comes on an expedition and she kills off half her people and crazy stuff happens there. Okay, she was slightly crazy, just like her dad, not like her brother, not like Leif, her brother, but like her father, hot-headed and crazy. And the expedition eventually ends in a disaster and they have to go back, but she gives birth to a child. So the first European child born in North America. What was his name? Freydis. Okay. Freydis Erikson son. Well, who was her son? Erikson. Who had a son? Okay, it was not her son. Then whose son was it? First European child born in North America. Snorri Thorfinnsson. Yes. Okay, he was the son of Thorfinn Karlsefni and Gudrid Thorbjarnardottir. Okay, so Snorri Thorfinnsson. He was born around 1000 AD. We don't know exactly when he was born. Around that time. So you had Europeans who reached the Americas, North America, like half a millennium before Christopher Columbus stumbled into the West Indies, right? So that did happen, but the Spanish, they had the support of their crown, which is why when Christopher Columbus was sponsored, he was funded by the Spanish crown, right? And then after he went back to Spain and announced that he had discovered India, eventually people realized it's not India, it's something else. And then the crown, the Spanish royalty, they funded more expeditions. And that's how the Spaniards were able to establish a foothold, eventually a stronghold in the Americas. In the case of the Vikings, it was all family funded, self-funded expeditions. There was no support from any crown or whatever, which is why didn't succeed. It was kind of buried in the annals of history. So you had, you had interactions between Native Americans and Europeans before that. When it comes to other interactions between the Native Americans and people from other parts of the world, we don't have a hard evidence of that. But evidence eventually may be forthcoming potentially. We'll see. Right, real Vladimir Putin says this barbarian, you say, named Thomas Ravenshaw caused the famine in Odisha, which killed a third of the population of Odisha. Today, there's a college named after Thomas Ravenshaw. I believe it is in Cuttack, Odisha. Brown sepoys state that he was a visionary who gave education to us Indians, or to us poor, backward, illiterate Indians, because we had no such thing as education, right? It's the British who introduced education into India, before which we were like living in trees or whatever, right? So, is this the unfortunate reality of a colonized nation like India? Okay, let us discuss this individual called Thomas Ravenshaw. So, he was a East India Company official, a British official in administrator, who was in charge of administering Odisha uh, in the 1860s. And there was the period of the British occupation of India that's a period of about 2.5 centuries. And the British engineered hundreds of artificial famines in India during this time period. Before that, you had like three famines potentially in 2000 years in India. You had monsoon failures from time to time. Of course, you had monsoon. The monsoon would fail every few years in the subcontinent, and yet you would not have famines. There was a famine during the time of Jahangir, or whatever that guy's name was, the Timurid despot who ruled some parts of India. That was because of his mismanagement and so on. But in India, our kings, emperors, our rulers, they had a policy of storing large quantities of grain, precisely because once in a while you would have the failure of the monsoon. So when this sort of thing happened, they would not collect taxes from the people during that year, and then they would actually distribute grain and other foodstuffs to the people so that nobody goes hungry. That's the policy our rulers always had. Our rulers were kings and emperors, like dictators. No democracy. There was no democracy in India at the time, but you had no famines. Then the kindly, benevolent British came to India, and in 2.5 centuries, they engineered hundreds of artificial famines in India. Because if the Indians can't eat, if they are starving, how will they fight? Brilliant. He's brilliant, yes? So this individual, Thomas Ravenshaw, let us first of all say what Google has to say about this gentleman. Thomas Ravenshaw. Thomas Edward Ravenshaw. Does he have a Wikipedia page? Yes. No, we have a Ravenshaw Collegiate School. But where is the page about Thomas Ravenshaw? This is a Wikipedia. Thomas Edward Ravenshaw. There's no page for this guy. How tragic that he has no. But there's something called Grokipedia. What's Grokipedia? Okay, Grokipedia is an AI generated Wikipedia. I think Grok, right? Elon Musk's AI. It says Thomas Edward Ravenshaw was a British colonial administrator and educator who served in the Indian Civil Service, notably as commissioner of the Odisha division between 1865 to 1878. It was in 1866, I believe, that you had the horrific Naanka famine, which killed off at least 1 million people of Odisha, 1/3 of the people of Odisha. Right. And he says, you see what Grok says? He founded Ravenshaw College in Cuttack and advanced educational reforms in the region. Yeah. Go back. Does it say anything about the famine? Yeah. Ravenshaw's tenure coincided, because of coincidence, with the devastating Naanka famine of 1865-66, which killed about 1/3 of the population of Odisha. And he faced mild criticism in the subsequent Odisha Famine Commission report for supposedly inadequate relief measures. He decided against importing rice, although his overall administrative approach was noted for sincerity towards local welfare. So Grokipedia absolves Thomas Ravenshaw of any actual responsibility for the tragic, completely coincidental, completely accidental death of 1/3 of the population of Odisha. 1/3 of the population of Odisha. Right? And then he founded this fantastic college. Okay, let's see what Wikipedia has to say about this college. Thomas Ravenshaw. It has a page about the college, university. So, Ravenshaw University, formerly known as Ravenshaw College, is a co-educational state university situated in Cuttack, Odisha, on the eastern coast of India. It was founded as Ravenshaw College in 1868. It became a university in 2006. It has nine schools, blah 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 blah. It has it is one of the oldest educational institutes in the country, and its history is synonymous with the history of modern Odisha. Oldest educational institutes in the country. We've had universities that existed 2,500 years before today, and that's what Wikipedia tells you. Okay, let's continue. So after the Great Famine of 1866, the people of Odisha and some liberal Britons wanted to start a college at Cuttack, and Thomas Ravenshaw was the fantastic guy who made it happen. Apparently, Odisha famine of okay, this one right, 1866. Da, da, da. The impact of the famine, blah blah blah. Total number of deaths was at least 1 million, roughly one third of the population. Yeah. And over here, I'm sure they will write about how the British tried their best to help the Indians and all that stuff. Incorrect estimates, all innocent mistakes, right? They're claiming over here. The British engineered hundreds of artificial famines in India during the period of time when they occupied India. And this individual, Thomas Ravenshaw, oversaw, engineered one of these famines. Okay? And today you have a college, a university named after that person. And yeah, if you read Wikipedia, if you will, read what various Indian historians have to say, they will laud him to the high heavens as a person who brought education to this part of India, because Indians never had education. So this is the deal. India is a deeply, deeply mentally colonized nation. A lot of our people, because of through no fault of their own, are mentally colonized. They have this gigantic monkey sitting on their shoulder inferiority complex, and they worship people like this. These people brought civilization to India. They brought education to our backward, primitive ancestors. They brought railways to India. They brought the English language, the pinnacle of civilization, to India. They brought justice and a judiciary to India. They brought systematic administration to India, the Indian civil services, Indian administrative service, whatever, civil services, so on. That's what Indians are made to believe. That's what they are taught by the textbooks, by the education system, and by their teachers and professors. We need to start revisiting the past through a clear lens, a factual lens. So yeah, this is the case. Thomas Ravenshaw University or college or whatever it is. They should rename it. There needs to be a national commission for decolonization where all these names, wherever you have names that have been imposed by foreigners or that honor and glorify foreign occupiers, wherever you have this, first of all, we should compile a whole list of such places and institutions in India. And then in one go, I think we need to have a bill in parliament or something that renames everything to the original names. Or if there's something like the Ravenshaw College that was created by some foreigner, we can rename it after some freedom fighter, not somebody who sat on a 3-day fast or whatever, somebody who actually gave their life for the country. Okay? There are, I mean, if you sat for a 2-day or 3-day fast, that's not freedom fighting. Okay? A freedom fighter is somebody who fights, not somebody who sits and sips warm water and says, I am fasting for 2 days or 3 days. That's not a fight for freedom. Okay? It's a joke. Yeah. Nirvana Shanks says, what were the main causes of the Great Depression in the United States, including stock market speculation, banking failures, agricultural overproduction, and government policies? How did these factors lead to economic collapse and mass unemployment? Why did this depression have ripple effects throughout the world, even though the dollar was not the global reserve currency? And in response, what was the New Deal initiated by Franklin D. Roosevelt? And how did its programs aim to achieve economic recovery, financial reform, and social welfare, including measures like the Social Security Act, works, etc., 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 etc. Okay. Look, the question you've asked, and including all the questions you've asked, are incredibly detailed with lots of sub questions that need to be answered. It's to answer all of this, it would take maybe um, uh, a history course that lasts a semester. Okay, if you want to have this answered in detail, and I would have to read up a lot before I can answer much of this. So let me focus on one of the causes of the Great Depression. One of the causes. There's plenty of causes, like you said, stock market speculation, banking failures, blah blah, all the stuff that happened. But there is one cause of the Great Depression that's not quite focused on a lot, which is the dust bowl. The dust bowl. The Americans say bowl. I say bowl. Dust bowl. Dust bowl. What is the dust bowl? DUSTBOWL. Okay, first of all, let's ask, what are the main causes of the Great Depression? What were the main causes of the Great Depression in the United States? So it's going to list a bunch of factors, including, I suppose, this dust bowl. Okay, yeah, it's the last thing. It's asking. It's listing. So the dust bowl was a severe, prolonged drought in the American Midwest. So what is the American Midwest? Okay, what is this American Midwest? Let's find out. What's the American Midwest? So if you go to images, you'll find that this is the American Midwest. This red shaded region. What's the Great Plains region? Great Plains map. The Great Plains are here. The Midwest is there. There is some overlap. Now, what happened is the question. What is this dust bowl? Great, horrific period of drought. Very dry weather. And this huge, there used to be these gigantic clouds of dust that would just roll across the entire continent. Okay, once again, let's see this dust bowl. So if you see the images, you see gigantic walls of dust rolling across the entire continent. The United States is much of North America, which is kind of a continent, you could say, and it devastated the whole, a large part of the United States. Okay, and this is a very famous picture from that time. Okay, migrant mother, and so on. So this caused tremendous devastation, and this was one of the contributing factors of the Great Depression. Now, what was this dust bowl? What caused it is the big question. Is it poor agricultural practices that caused the dust bowl? It's one of the causes of the Great Depression. Was it simply poor agricultural practices that caused the dust bowl? No, is not the real cause. The real cause of the dust bowl is the genocide of the North American wild bison, which was systematically done by the government of the United States. You had tens, maybe hundreds of millions of wild bisons in North America. They lived in the Great Plains regions, and they lived across North America. Okay, what does this North American wild bison look like? North American bison. That's what this beast looks like. It's a member of the bovine family, cow, buffalo, that family. Okay, it's a bovine creature. You have what's the population today? I wonder. Population today. How many? Maybe 400, 500,000 bison. Okay, 1800. What is the population in 1800? 30 to 60 million. You had 30 to 60 million, which is now less than 500,000. What was the population in 1900? I wonder. 1900? Less than 1,000. So 1800, you had 60 million. 1900, you had less than 1,000. What happened? The American government, the government of the United States, systematically genocided the wild bisons. Why? Why would you do that? And what does it have to do with the dust bowl? First of all, why? The entire lifestyle of the Native Americans, especially the so-called Plains Indians, it depended on the wild bison. They would hunt the wild bison. They would use its meat for nourishment. They would use its bones for making weapons and spears and arrowheads and whatnot, or whatever parts, right? They would use its skins, its hides for clothing, for making tents. As long as the wild bisons existed, the Plains Indians, they could survive. If you kill off the wild bisons, the Plains Indians go extinct. The Native Americans, they go extinct. So the genocide of the North American wild bison, it essentially was tied to the genocide of the Native Americans. Okay, if you see let's see the American Declaration of Independence, shall we? American Declaration of Independence text. Let's see the Declaration of Independence, shall we? Let's see what is self-evident. It says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, not women, all men are created equal. All men are created equal. Okay, now let's search for the word savage. Savage. So on the one hand, all men allegedly are created equal, and then it speaks about the merciless Indian savages. Okay, so what's it say here? Let facts be submitted to a candid world. The history of the presence of the great king of Britain. And he says, where is it? Once again, savage, merciless Indian savages. The King of England has endeavored to bring upon the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages. All that. So, in the Declaration of Independence of the US, they consider clearly on paper, that they put it down on the record, that they consider the Indians to be merciless savages. And when someone is a merciless bunch of savages, they have to be exterminated, right? And that's what the Americans did. Okay, in the 1800s and so on. 1776 was when the United States was eventually founded. In the next century and a half, they essentially almost exterminated the Native Americans. And whoever survived were relegated to second-class citizen status. And they still are that way. They live on reservations. Don't get off the reservation. Stay on the reservation. That sort of thing. So to put an end to their lifestyle and to steal their land and to marginalize them, the US government decided to exterminate the wild bison. So you had 60 million wild bison that stampeded across North America. Their dung, their excrement would fertilize the soil, and their hooves would compactify the soil. Okay. Now, when suddenly in a few decades 60 million are gone, you have less than 1,000, then there's nothing to fertilize the soil, and there's nothing to compactify the soil. So the soil starts losing vegetation. It starts becoming loose. And by the late 1920s, early 1930s, the soil was destroyed. The topsoil was loose. And then, because of this horrific change that had been brought upon North America, the soil just flew up in the air. And that caused those gigantic dust clouds that destroyed agriculture, destroyed much of North America. And that was one of the causative factors of the Great Depression. So the elimination, the genocide of the wild bisons, it destroyed the quality of the soil in North America. The soil which used to be fertile and compact was now barren and loose. And eventually it caused the perfect storm where you had gigantic, massive clouds of dust billowing constantly for years across North America. Devastated the land, devastated agriculture. You've planted crops, suddenly there's this dust that comes and destroys everything. It buries your crops under feet of dust. How do you dig that out? By the time you dig it out, the plants are gone, they're dead. So it destroyed agriculture, it caused famine, and it was one of the causative factors of the Great Depression. So you could say it's an example of the butterfly effect. Not quite. It's not a small thing. It was a gigantic thing. The killing of 60 million bison that led to eventually the Dust Bowl. Okay. Real Vladimir Putin says, was Judaism originally a polytheistic culture? If so, how did it become monotheistic? What is the meaning of the nation of the Jewish people? Modern nation, Israel. What's the meaning of Israel? Let's find out. Meaning of Israel. What does Israel mean? It translates to one who struggles with God, etc. Let's see what Wikipedia has to say about this. What's the meaning of the name of Israel? Israel is a masculine Hebrew name. In Hebrew, the name Israel comes from Sarah, which means to struggle with, and El, which is a Hebrew word for God. What is El? How is El God? What is El? El is a Northwest Semitic word meaning God or deity, referring to any one of multiple major Near Eastern deities. Okay? So, El was one of the gods of the Jewish people. One of the gods of the Jewish people. Not the only god of the Jewish people. Okay? Now, what is the Jewish God called today? The God, which is the God of the Jews? Which is the God of the Jews? The God of the Jewish people is what is it? Yahweh, right? Yahweh. The God of the Jewish people is Yahweh. Adonai, etc. But it's Yahweh. What is Yahweh? Let's see. Yahweh. Yahweh. Yahweh is the principal proper name of the God of ancient Israel. So earliest depiction of Yahweh. What's Yahweh look like in his earliest depiction? This is what Yahweh looks like in his earliest depiction. As you can see, it's one. So he's the wife. There's a sacred cow or something as well. Looks like, right? Yahweh and his wife. So it looks like the Jewish people originally were polytheists. They also had gods called Baal, various Baal gods. Baal means Lord, and it could mean multiple gods. So Judaism was originally polytheistic, and then during the time of Abraham, etc., it became monotheistic. And there's a whole story behind that. Okay. Rahul Dunake says, was the Maldives formed due to northward migration of the Indian tectonic plate 50 million years ago? So the Maldives is not one island, it's a whole bunch of islands. And it's actually part of the Chagos Lakshadweep range of islands. Okay, so let's take a look at the map. Chagos Lakshadweep. First of all, we will understand the geography. Then we shall discuss the formation of the Maldives. So if you look at, let's go to the satellite thing. Satellite, yes. So if we go to India's west coast, you will find that you have a bunch of islands here, which are called the Lakshadweep Islands. Okay. If you go down south further, you have Minicoy, which is an Indian island. Then you have these bunch of islands here, which are the Maldives. The Maldives archipelago. So it's part of the same island chain. The Lakshadweep and the Maldivian Islands are part of the same island chain. It ends all the way down south with the Chagos Islands, which is currently called the so-called British Indian Ocean Territory. So you have a bunch of islands here, which is the Chagos Islands. So it's the Chagos Lakshadweep island chain that the Maldives are a part of. Now, if you extend this, you also come all the way here to Mauritius and Réunion. This also is part of this. You could say, historically, when we talk about tens of millions of years, it's kind of part of the same island chain. So the thing that's noteworthy is that the Indian subcontinent, it about 100 million years ago, it was attached to the east coast of Africa. Okay. Madagascar, if you see the shape of Madagascar, and if you see the shape of Mozambique here, you can see that Madagascar can kind of fit into this corner of Africa, right? Like a jigsaw piece, like a piece of a jigsaw puzzle. And if you see Madagascar and the northern pointed end of Madagascar, it can kind of fit into the Gulf of Khambat over here. Kind of, it can. So it is all tied together. It was all connected together. So because of tectonic activity, Madagascar and the Indian subcontinent, which used to be attached to Eastern Africa, they broke off. Madagascar was left behind, and the Indian subcontinent, it traveled all the way from the east coast of Africa, all the way up here, up here, up here, up here, and eventually slammed into Eurasia. And this slamming process gave rise to this massive, the world's tallest mountain range, which is the Himalayas. Now, so how did the Maldives and the Lakshadweep islands, etc., how did they form? Is the question. So about 65, 66 million years ago, India was still around this region. Okay, and India was over a place called the Réunion hotspot. So today you have this island here called Réunion, which is a French island, and you have Mauritius not far from it. So this place, Réunion, it used to be a gigantic ancient lava plume, magma plume, which means that it was like a gigantic super volcano kind of thing. And at that time, about 65, 66 million years ago, India was positioned above the Réunion hotspot. And there was this massive volcanism in India, which you can still see, evidence of in the Deccan traps. Shall we see what the Deccan traps are? Let's see what the Deccan traps are. Give me a second. Let's try and find the Deccan traps. Let's go back to Google. So the Deccan traps are evidence of ancient volcanism in India, massive volcanism. Deccan traps. Okay, gigantic igneous province. Okay, this here. And you can see the ancient cooled lava all over the place. And you had dinosaurs all across India, which, yeah. So this is the Deccan traps. You can still see ancient lava deposits all over the place. Okay. And that was caused by volcanism in India at a time when India was in the middle of the Indian Ocean and over the Réunion hotspot. So this was like a gigantic volcanic region. And then India went northwards. And the process of India going northwards and moving away from the Réunion hotspot, that gave rise to multiple volcanoes in the ocean, which eventually went extinct and became islands, such as Mauritius, such as the Chagos Archipelago, such as the Maldives, and such as the Lakshadweep Islands. So yes, the Maldives were formed due to the northward migration, tectonic migration of the Indian tectonic plate in the Indian subcontinent, roughly, you could say 50 or 40 million years ago. Yeah. Rinigan says, after the Anglo-Manipuri War, which war? There's no such thing, but okay, let's take the question. After the so-called Anglo-Manipuri War, guns from all the natives were taken by the British, but they distributed guns to Kukis only. Kukis killed 300 from a village of 400 Kabui population. From Shimla records, we get the report of the reality of the 1917 to 1919 Kuki rebellion. 999 civilians killed, 21 missing. Kukis were also involved in Japanese plane bombing of Manipur, May 10, 1942, when hundreds of civilians were killed while praying at a temple, Hindu temple. Only 4th Assam Rifles were deployed in Manipur at the time, with only some hundreds of troops, so the security was very less. And some individual, president of KNO, an author of some book, created a fake narrative called Anglo-Kuki War to legitimize his claims. How do we expose this Khilafat movement the way it's been exposed? Any relation with World War One? Okay, so what's the deal? So today there are some so-called historians who say that there was an Anglo-Kuki War when the Kukis fought against the British, so they must be considered to be Indians. So what's the real deal? What really happened is the question. Anglo-Kuki War. First of all, there was no Anglo-Kuki War. But what actually happened? Something did happen at the time. So first of all, if you see, various parts of India came under British occupation at different points in time. A lot of the subcontinent came under British occupation properly after 1857, after the indigenous Indian kings and queens were defeated and killed off. Entire families were killed off by the British, royal families, and fake puppets were put in their places as fake kings, which are eventually the so-called princely states. Some of the kings that survived for 1857 were the real kings, but most were killed off and replaced by puppets. illegitimate puppets. And I'll not take their names because unnecessary. So Manipur fell to the British in 1891. There was an Anglo-Manipuri war, and the Manipuris were defeated. Their king was sent into exile to the Andamans, and their Yuvraj was hanged in the city of Imphal. Okay, in 1891. Then the British started settling cookies into this region. This process started in the middle of the 19th century, but after 1891, the British started settling lots of cookies in Manipur as a punitive measure to punish the indigenous Manipuris for daring to fight the British. So we will now bring in foreigners to take over your territories and see what you can do. You can do nothing now. So they started settling cookies. These, these individuals, these tribals who were settled in Burma, they were then brought into Manipur steadily, progressively by the British. So once they occupied Manipur, the British started eventually conducting censuses, starting in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and so on. If you see the British census records, you will see that there was just a tiny handful of cookies in Manipur. But then the population starts steadily rising, and today the cookies are the majority population in Manipur. Obviously, all infiltrators, but whatever. Now, so the cookies were favored by the British. The indigenous Manipuris were regarded with a great amount of suspicion by the British, obviously, because they fought the British. The cookies were settled by the British. Now, and the cookies, they were allowed to have guns by the British, and all the natives, their weapons were taken away by the British, and the cookies were allowed to have weapons. Now, during the First World War, let's fast forward to the First World War, 1914 to 1919 or whatever it was, First World War. At the time, the British employed a very large number of Indian soldiers to fight on their behalf in Europe and wherever else. Okay, let's find out how many Indians were made to fight by the British in the First World War. Okay, let's see. How many Indian soldiers fought and died in the First World War? So, about 1.5 million Indian soldiers fought in the First World War, and maybe 75,000 or so may have died. Maybe 100,000 died. So 100,000 Indians died, soldiers, and 1.5 million Indian soldiers fought for the British in the First World War. So during the time of the First World War, all Indian soldiers, etc., were abroad fighting for the British. So the security in various parts of India was less. So in Manipur, okay, in Manipur, you had like you say, I'm not sure about this, what you're saying, but maybe it's true. 4th Assam Rifles, maybe some small number of troops were there in Manipur, and they were not really soldiers, they were paramilitary forces. The Assam Rifles is a paramilitary organization. They are not the Indian armed forces. They're not the Indian military even today. It's a police force that wears army uniforms. It's not the Indian military. So the Assam Rifles, whatever were deployed, maybe a small number of them. And Manipur was essentially, there was no security as such. So the cookies at the time, they decided, okay, now there is no British presence here, very little British presence, small number of whatever Assam Rifles forces. Let's now try and take over more territory. Okay, so that's what they did. So it was not a war against the British. It was a rebellion trying to capture more territory in Manipur than the British had given them. Whose territory? Indigenous territory of the indigenous people of Manipur. It was a land grab operation by the cookies. And when the British came to know about this, they fought them back and they defeated them, obviously. So it was not a war of independence trying to fight for India's independence against the British. It was a land grab. It was a small, petty land grab operation by the cookies. That's what the cookies tried to do. It was not some great cookie rebellion or great Anglo-Kuki war or whatever. The cookies, they served the British. And while the British were occupied in the First World War, the cookies tried to grab more territory from the indigenous native people of Manipur. That's what it was. And they were put back in their place eventually by the British. They were punished. Thieves and brigands. That's what it is. There was no Anglo-Kuki war. There are other narratives like they served in the Indian National Army or something of Subhash Chandra Bose. These are all fake narratives that have been created in the late 20th century and the early 21st century. Okay, no such thing happened. Whoever is doing this is trying to rewrite history. They're trying to create fake narratives. And you know how Indian universities are, all kinds of BS is published. That's what happens. That's what is being attempted right now, to create a new version of history, completely fake history. That's what's happening. The so-called Kuki thing, it was a land grab operation. The Kukis wanted to massacre more natives and take over their lands and villages and territory. That's all they wanted to do. They were not fighting the British. They were trying to steal the land of the natives. That's what the Kukis were attempting to do in 1917 and whatever. And eventually, the British understood what they came to know about what was happening, and they punished the Kukis for that. So it was not some freedom struggle or whatever. Okay, so let's set the record straight. Okay, Om Bekeriker says, the reanalyzed 2019 IVC samples already show pre-existing levels of Anatolian farmer, Iranian-related CHG, okay, and EHG via WSHG ancestries. I'm not very sure about what all these things are, but okay. Eastern hunter-gatherers, EHG is Eastern hunter-gatherers, WSHG is some other kind of hunter-gatherers, I suppose. And these are the exact components that make up the so-called steppe ancestry, and they were already present in the IVC Indus Valley civilization time period before the 1500 BCE migration. There was no 1500 BCE migration, but that's what they claim, right? The Aryan invasion is now a migration, and it happened in 1500 BCE. That's the story that we are taught today. So is it possible that the genetic algorithms are accidentally counting these older pre-existing IVC building blocks as step DNA and so on? So look, they will try and distort history. They will try and bring in genetic evidence and so on. There was no migration in 1500 BC. Okay. And like you say, the 2019, the samples that were analyzed then, they show pre-existing levels of whatever before any so-called 1500 BC migration, if it ever happened. So yeah, so let me show you an example of how these people distort. They create fake narratives based on spurious logic, let's say. Okay, so let's do this search together. Okay, let's search for Narasimhan et al. Narassimhanetl 2019. Okay, the formation of human populations in South and Central. Let's open that. Give me a second. Let me open that. Okay, let me open that. Give me a second. And let's see. So it's considered to be a foundational paper by this fine gentleman called Vakish Narasimhan in association with another fine gentleman called David Reich. The formation of human populations in South and Central Asia. Okay, that's what this paper is about. And it makes all kinds of claims, ancient DNA, blah, 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 blah. So let's search for example, let's search for the term female. So genomic formation of South Asia, it says. So plot of the contribution of central steppe ancestry on the autosomes and Y chromosomes shows that the source of this ancestry is primarily from females in late Bronze Age and Iron Age, blah, blah, blah. Primarily from females, not from males. Steppe ancestry comes from females. Okay, once again here. In the late Bronze Age and Iron Age individuals of the Swat Valley, we detect a significantly lower population of steppe admixture of the Y chromosome compared with 20% of the autosomes, blah, 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 documenting how steppe ancestry was incorporated into these groups largely through females. Was there a female Aryan invasion? So, if you read this paper in detail, okay, I have read this in detail, it will tell you that the so-called steppe ancestry, which is the Aryan invasion migration ancestry, okay, the steppe ancestry until about 800 BC was mainly female mediated. Read the paper and fact check what I am saying. Read the paper and fact check what I am saying. This paper is telling you, okay, that steppe ancestry in the subcontinent until about 800 BC was female mediated. That automatically disproves your Aryan invasion and migration both. Okay. Now, Sintashta. Let's see Sintashta. Sintashta. Okay. What do we have? Sintashta. One second. What was that? 1700. 970. Where is 970? Do we have 970? Okay. 1700. Okay. 1700. You have 1, 2. So essentially, if you study this properly, it will say that this Sintashta steppe ancestry, it originates about 1700 BC, but does not enter the subcontinent until about 970 BC. Okay, so it enters the subcontinent earliest 970 BC, and overall until about 800 BC, this steppe ancestry is female mediated mostly. Then they will say, okay, ANI, where is ANI? Ancestral North Indian. ANI ASI, right? ANI and ASI. It says that ancestral North Indian population is 2000 BC, which has steppe ancestry. It also claims that before 970 BC, there is no steppe ancestry in India. But ancestral North Indian is 2000 BC. And until 800 BC, steppe ancestry was female mediated. This is a joke. How did this paper get published is my question. These people, Vagish Narasimhan, David Reich, they are resorting to time travel arguments. They're resorting to time travel to keep pushing this fake theory. Read this paper. If you don't know how to figure it out, ask an AI. Ask your chat GPT. Okay, ask chat GPT. Does this paper claim or not that until about 800 BC, steppe ancestry was mostly female mediated in India? Okay, that's number one. Secondly, does it not say that the steppe ancestry, earliest existence of steppe ancestry in Eurasia is 1700 BC? 1700 BC. But ANI, ancestral North Indian, which is steppe ancestry, is 2000 BC. How the hell does it work? How the hell does it work? They are resorting to time travel arguments to keep pushing this bankrupt theory. Aryan invasion, Aryan migration, Aryan tourism, Aryan picnic. It's not going to work. Ask your favorite AI to analyze this paper, and these points that are these things that are pointed out. Ask the AI. Okay, what I have claimed, is it correct or not? And is this paper logically consistent or is it logically broken? Ask your AI. Fact check what I am saying. Okay, it's all a joke. And I don't understand how a paper like this, where the logic involves time travel, how does it get published? And why do people cite this paper when it is so broken? So logically incoherent, inconsistent, and logically completely wrong. How? Isn't the Aryan invasion, migration, whatever, isn't it supposed to be male mediated? I mean, R1A is supposed to be a Y chromosomal haplogroup. Aryan invasion, migration, whatever, is supposed to be male mediated. But until 800 BC, your steppe ancestry is mostly female mediated, which means Indians were marrying steppe ancestry females. Do you understand what it means? Steppe ancestry is entering India until 800 BC, sure. But it's mostly female mediated, which means Indians are marrying females from Central Asia. That's what it means. And that's how you justify Aryan invasion or migration. What a clown show this is. Please, if you have a working brain, fact check this paper and fact check what I'm claiming. All right, here we go. Next. Wojak dilemma says, was Mao's invasion, Mao Zedong, was Mao's invasion of India a surprise? Were there signs of it being a possibility? How did Mr. Nehru not see it coming? Question is good. Yes, very good question. Was Mao's invasion of India a surprise? It happened in 1962, yes. Now, what happened 12 years before that? Mao's invasion of Tibet. So Mao invades Tibet in 1950. He invades India in 1962, 12 years later. Was this invasion of India a surprise? I mean, if he invades Tibet, he'll come to India next, right? Potentially, possibly. Should we not have at least some kind of foresight that that could happen? But let's say there was no foresight, but there was a warning allegedly. Let's figure out what this warning was. Okay, let's see. Let's Google something. Patel's letter to Nehru, 1950. Patel's letter to Nehru, 1950. Okay, let's see this source. Yes. Do we have the whole thing? Do we have the entire thing? Okay, shall we read the entire? Why not read the whole thing since we are discussing this? Okay, so Sardar Patel's letter to Prime Minister Shri Jawaharlal Nehru ji, dated November 7, 1950. Let's read this. New Delhi, 7 November 1950. My dear Jawaharlal, ever since my return from Ahmedabad and after the cabinet meeting the same day, which I had to attend at practically 15 minutes notice, and for which I regret I was not able to read all the papers, I have been anxiously thinking over the problem of Tibet, and I thought I should share with you what is passing through my mind, dear Jawaharlal. I have carefully gone through the correspondence between the External Affairs Ministry and our ambassador in Peking, and through him the Chinese government. I have tried to peruse this correspondence as favorably to our ambassador and the Chinese government as possible. But I regret to say that neither of them comes out well as a result of this study. The Chinese government has tried to delude us by professions of peaceful intention. My own feeling is that at a crucial period, they managed to instill into our ambassador a false sense of confidence in their so-called desire to settle the Tibetan problem by so-called peaceful means. There can be no doubt that during the period covered by this correspondence, the Chinese must have been concentrating for an onslaught on Tibet. The final action of the Chinese, in my judgment, is little short of perfidy. The tragedy of it is that the Tibetans put faith in us Indians. They chose to be guided by us Indians, and we have been unable to get them out of the meshes of Chinese diplomacy or Chinese malevolence. From the latest position, it appears that we shall not be able to rescue the Dalai Lama. Our ambassador has been at great pains, to find an explanation or justification for Chinese policy and actions. Our ambassador clearly is a fool. That's my words. As the External Affairs Ministry remarked in one of their telegrams, there was a lack of firmness and unnecessary apology in one or two representations that our ambassador made to the Chinese government on our behalf. It is impossible to imagine any sensible person believing in the so-called threat to China from Anglo-American machinations in Tibet. Therefore, if the Chinese put faith in this, they must have distrusted us so completely as to have taken us as tools or stooges of Anglo-American diplomacy or strategy. This feeling, if genuinely entertained by the Chinese in spite of your direct approaches to them, indicates that even though we regard ourselves as friends of China, the Chinese do not regard us as their friends. With the communist mentality of whoever is not with them being against them, this is a significant pointer of which we have to take due note. During the last several months outside the Russian camp, we have practically been alone in championing the cause of Chinese entry into the UN, Jawaharlal Nehru's pet thing, and in securing from the Americans assurances on the question of Formosa, Taiwan. We have done everything we could to assuage Chinese feelings, to allay its apprehensions, and to defend its legitimate claims in our discussions and correspondence with America and Britain and in the UN. In spite of this, China is not convinced about our disinterestedness. It continues to regard us with suspicion, and the whole psychology is one, at least outwardly, of skepticism, perhaps mixed with a little hostility. I doubt if we can go any further than that we have done already to convince China of our good intentions, friendliness, and goodwill. In Peking, we have an ambassador who is eminently suitable for putting across the friendly point of view. Even he seems to have failed to convert the Chinese. Their last telegram to us is an act of gross discourtesy, not only in the summary way it disposes of our protest against the entry of Chinese forces into Tibet, but also in the wild insinuation that our attitude is determined by foreign influences. It looks as though it is not a friend speaking in that language, but a potential enemy. In the background of this, we have to consider what new situation now faces us as a result of the disappearance of Tibet as we knew it and the expansion of China almost up to our gates. Throughout history, we have seldom been worried about our northeast frontier. The Himalayas have been regarded as an impenetrable barrier against any threat from the north. We had friendly Tibet, which gave us no trouble. The Chinese were divided. They had their own domestic problems and never bothered us about frontiers. In 1914, we entered into a convention with Tibet, which was not endorsed by the Chinese. We seem to have regarded Tibetan autonomy as extending to independent treaty relationship. Presumably, all that we required was Chinese counter signature. The Chinese interpretation of suzerainty seems to be different. We can therefore safely assume that very soon they will disown all the stipulations which Tibet has entered into us in the past. That throws into the melting pot all frontier and commercial settlements with Tibet on which we have been functioning and acting during the last half century. China is no longer divided, it is united and strong. All along the Himalayas and in the north and northeast, we have on our side of the frontier a population ethnologically and culturally not different from the Tibetans and Mongoloids. The undefined state of the frontier and the existence on our side of a population with its affinities to Tibetans or Chinese have all the elements of the potential trouble between China and ourselves. Recent and bitter history also tells us that communism is no shield against imperialism, and that the communists are as good or as bad imperialists as any other. Chinese ambitions in this respect not only covered the Himalayan slopes on our side, but also include the important part of Assam. They have their ambitions in Burma also. Burma has the added difficulty, it has no McMahon line on which to build up even the semblance of an agreement. Chinese irredentism and communist imperialism are different from the expansionism or imperialism of the Western powers. The former has a cloak of ideology which makes it 10 times more dangerous. In the guise of ideological expansion lie concealed racial, national, or historical claims. The danger from the north and northeast therefore becomes both communist and imperialist. While our Western and non-Western threat to security is still as prominent as before, a new threat has developed from the north and northeast. Thus, for the first time after centuries, India's defense has to concentrate itself on two fronts simultaneously. Our defense measures so far have been based on the calculations of superiority over Pakistan. In our calculations, we shall now have to reckon with communist China in the north and in the northeast, a communist China which has definite ambitions and aims and which does not in any way seem friendly disposed towards us. Long story short, it's a long letter, but do you understand? In 1950, Mr. Patel had very clearly seen through the Chinese imperialistic, hegemonistic ambitions, and he had very clearly warned Mr. Nehru of what could be coming. 12 years before Mao's invasion of India. Was it a surprise? Clearly not a surprise. It should not have been a surprise. Clearly the warning was there from no less a person than Mr. Patel himself. But the government of India paid no regard to what Mr. Patel had to say. The great, magnificent Prime Minister of India, Mr. Nehru ji, paid no regard, paid no heed to Mr. Patel's warnings, and Mr. Patel's warnings proved to be 100% correct. So there you have it. Amisha Mishra says, what happened to the civilians in Constantinople after the Turks took it? So, 1453, you have a young Ottoman king, Mehmet II. Young guy. He was in his early 20s. And he besieges Constantinople. And the siege lasts months. And eventually there's this Hungarian gunsmith whose only ambition in life is to make the biggest cannon in the world. And he had gone to the Byzantine emperor in Constantinople. He said, please give me the resources and the money to build the world's largest cannon. I'll build it for you, and we will obliterate the Turks." And the Byzantine emperor says, "Go to hell. I'm not interested." So this guy, all he wanted to do was to build the world's largest gun. So then he goes to the Turks. And the Turks are super frustrated by this time. Constantinople has this massive walls that have withstood any bombardment the Turks have done, and it's made no difference. So this Hungarian gunsmith goes to the Ottoman king, Mehmed II, says, "I want to build the largest gun. It will help you defeat the Byzantines. Give me the money, resources. I'll build the gun for you." And Mehmed II says, "Go ahead. You have the money, you have the resources, build the gun." So this guy, this Hungarian gunsmith, builds the world's largest cannon for its time, most powerful cannon. And using that cannon, the Turks are able to blast through the walls of Constantinople. And in 1453, the Turks enter and take Constantinople. That's the end of the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, and the beginning of the Ottoman Empire. Okay, Constantinople was called the Red Apple, Kizil Elma, by the Turks, and they took it. And Mehmed II came to be known as Fateh, the conqueror, Mehmed the Conqueror. So what happened once the Turks entered Constantinople? What happened to the civilians? Well, as per Turkish culture, practice, tradition, whenever the Turks took a new city, the king would give his soldiers 3 days. Do what you want. Take what you want. I will not come in your way. So for 3 days, the Turkish soldiers were given complete access to the city to do what they wanted with the city and take whatever they wanted for themselves. Whatever treasures they could plunder, they became their personal possessions, not the king's possessions. That was the Turkish way of doing things. 3 days, the soldiers can take whatever they want. After 3 days, the emperor or the king steps in and puts an end to everything. So for 3 days, Mehmed's soldiers, they ran wild across Constantinople, killing, murdering, doing whatever else, your standard Turkish atrocities, and stealing and plundering whatever they could. Yeah, that's what happened to the civilians. Those who somehow hid themselves and survived, they were allowed to continue existing after those 3 days were over. And I suppose they were allowed to continue existing, I suppose, if they converted to the religion of the Turks practiced or whatever. Eventually, I suppose some people were allowed to leave and whatnot. But those 3 days was pure mayhem, pure barbarism. That's what happened to the civilians for 3 days at least. After that, those who survived and those who successfully hid away, they would have been allowed to, I suppose, leave. And those who wanted to stay would have been, well, I suppose, obliged to convert to a different religion. Amisha says, why was General Robert Lee not hanged for high treason at the end of the Civil War, the American Civil War, 1865? 1865 is when you had the surrender of General Robert Lee to General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox. Okay? So you had this horrific, terrible, brutal civil war that raged across the United States, for several years. And eventually it ended with the surrender of the South. The war was fought over the secession of the South, because the South wanted to live a different lifestyle compared to the North. The South wanted slavery. Their entire economic model was built on slavery, and they wanted to continue that. And the North did not want slavery. They wanted to abolish the slavery. And there was a fundamental clash of lifestyles and values. So the South said, we will no longer be part of the US. We will secede. And they legally seceded from the US. Legally, they seceded from the United States. And Abraham Lincoln said, I will not allow this to happen. And that's why he went to war with the South. And then there was this war that went on for years. And eventually the North prevailed. The North, who was the leader, the military leader of the North, it was General Ulysses S. Grant. And a few years later, he became president of the United States. He was a war hero. So, and the supreme commander of the South, so to say, was General Robert Lee. There were two main belligerents. From the North, you had General Ulysses S. Grant. In the South, you had General Robert Lee. And they fought each other all over the place. Eventually, the South was defeated, and General Robert Lee came and offered his surrender to Ulysses S. Grant. And Ulysses S. Grant, with the approval of President Lincoln, offered very generous terms of surrender. That none of the soldiers who put down their weapons would be none of the soldiers who surrendered would be imprisoned or punished. They would be allowed to go back to wherever they came from, their lands or their homes in the South. As long as they abided by the terms of the surrender, they would not be imprisoned or punished. That was the agreement. Those were the very generous terms of surrender. They were even allowed to retain their weapons, if I'm not mistaken. So that was the deal. Because why were the terms so generous? Because Lincoln wanted a unified country. He fought to prevent the partition of the US. He fought to prevent. He decided to launch a civil war so that the south of the US would not secede and the US would not get partitioned. So now that he had succeeded, he wanted to reunify the country by not imposing harsh terms on the defeated side. Okay, he wanted to start immediately the process of national reconciliation and reintegration, or whatever you want to call it. That's why the terms were very generous. And those terms applied to General Robert Lee as well. And eventually there was this, I think there was a move by certain legislators, or whoever it was, to hold Robert Lee accountable and to, I think, give him the death penalty. And when Ulysses S. Grant came to know about this, he protested. He said that he would resign his command if any action was taken against Robert Lee. And he was the war hero, the man who won the war. So he prevailed. And that's why Robert Lee was not punished. He was not hanged or anything for high treason or whatever it was. And technically, legally, the South had seceded legally, not illegally. It was not treason. They had the right to secede. And they were prevented from seceding illegally, essentially, by launching a war. Yeah, from a legal perspective, that's indeed the case. So because of this, Robert Lee was not hanged. He lived on until, I don't know, a few more years. He was older than Ulysses Grant, maybe by about 15 years. And I think Ulysses Grant outlived Robert Lee by about 15 or 20 or so years, like that. Yeah. And yes, Ulysses S. Grant did become the president of the United States eventually. After Abraham Lincoln, there was somebody else. And after that, somebody else, you had Ulysses S. Grant, who became the president of the US. Vashisht says, why was there a change of the British view of India? Initially, they praised Indian culture, Hindu culture, and civilization. But later, there was this transformed into hatred of Indian culture. So what happened is the question. You see, the East India Company came to India to trade initially. 1610 or whatever, somewhere around that time, they set up their first factory on the west coast of India, Surat, right? And eventually they expand slowly, gradually, and so on. Eventually they start taking over large parts of India, that sort of thing. And they were in India to make profits. They were a trading company. Eventually they started controlling parts of India, and they having an army and all. But their objective was to trade and to make profits, the biggest profits they could manage. Right? Their objective was not to bring in, missionaries or whatever. None of that. They just wanted to trade. And they resisted any attempts by Britain to send missionaries to India, because they rightfully believed it would alienate the people of India and bring forth more resistance, which would definitely affect their profit margins and all that. So that's why they resisted that. And of course, many of these traders, the East India Company traders and so on, they had a very high view of Indian culture, Hindu culture. Definitely they did. Then what happened is there was an act of parliament in England. It was the Charter Act of 1813. Let's Google that. Charter Act of 1813. Charter Act of 1813. What was this thing? The Charter Act of 1813, passed by the British Parliament, renewed the East India Company's charter for another 20 years. That's fantastic. It marked a major shift in British policy by officially ending the company's trade monopoly in India, except for tea, opium, and trade with China. It formally asserted the undoubted sovereignty of the British Crown and so on. And then it legalized the entry for the first time of Christian missionaries into India to preach and convert Indians. Okay? And the state-funded education, which means the destruction of the Indian education system and the imposition of the British colonial education system upon India. So this is where things go wrong for India. This is where the Indian inferiority complex and mental colonization begins, with the Charter Act of 1813. So they started pushing Christian missionaries into India immediately after the Charter Act. Okay? That's the deal, the Charter Act. So the British East India Company was forced to officially allow Christian missionaries into its occupied territories in India. Okay? Following the passage of this Charter Act of 1813 by the Parliament of the UK, of Britain, which was the first missionary organization that was allowed into India. Let's see that. Okay, there was something called the American Marathi Mission. American Marathi Mission. What was this? Okay, the results seem to be in Marathi. What do we have here? Columbia University. It was the first Protestant mission. Okay, I'm not a bot, bro. So, American Marathi Mission records 1813. Immediately, they send missionaries. So, what was this American Marathi Mission? It was the first Protestant mission in Western India. It spread into hundreds of villages. The mission center moved from it was then called Bombay, now it's Mumbai, obviously, from Mumbai to Ahmednagar in 1831, because it was closer to the center of Marathi county. By 1911, Christian converts were attending church and school and learning academic subjects and blah, 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 blah. Okay. Aid for famine and plague victims. Okay, if you want aid, convert, obviously. Establishment of a women's Bible training school. Is anyone here from Maharashtra? Are you watching, people? The Marathi Mission founded colleges and the theological institution, leper colony in Sholapur. And yeah, they will mention caste prejudices and scarcity of blah, blah, etc., etc., etc. Who else? No other names crop up over here. Interesting that no other names are cropping up over here. Okay. So there was this. Okay, let's go back to Google and let's Google this person, Cynthia Farrar. Cynthia Farrar. Okay, this individual, Cynthia Farrar, was a Christian missionary from the United States of America, and she was a teacher. She was part of this, American Marathi Mission. She founded a girls' schools in Mumbai and Ahmednagar. And then I recommend you read further. I shall say nothing more. I recommend you read further if you are interested in this matter. Explains a lot. So that's how it went from an admiration of Indian civilization, culture, all that, to hatred, and the objective changed from just trading and making a profit to destroying Indian culture and civilization. That's where the Indian inferiority complex and mental colonization begins. All right. Sam the Gamer says, is the Epstein case unique? Or are these kinds of things part of broader American, European, or Western culture over a long period, from the beginning of the Christianization of the Europe, Christianization of Europe, not the Europe, of Europe? Let's go to our friend the Wikipedia and let's Google something. Okay, banquet of chestnuts. What is this banquet of chestnuts? Shall we find out? Shall we? Here we go. Banquet of chestnuts. Let's read the Wikipedia entry over this. Okay. The banquet of chestnuts was a supper held at the Papal Palace. Okay, the official residence of the Pope. So it was held at the Papal Palace in Rome. It was hosted by former Cardinal Cesare Borgia, the son of the Pope, Pope Alexander VI, on 31st October 1501. An account of the banquet appears in Liber Notarum of Johann Burchard, a master of ceremonies. This diary, a primary source in the life of the Pope Alexander VI, was preserved in the Vatican Secret Archive. It became available to researchers in the mid-19th century when Pope Leo XIII opened the archive. Although this Pope Leo expressed specific reluctance to allow general access to a document which might harm the reputation of Pope Alexander VI. So what happened? The banquet was given in Cesare Borgia's apartments in the Palazzo Apostolico, the official residence of the Pope. 50 prostitutes were in attendance for the entertainment of the banquet guests. What was the scene like? On the evening of the last day of October 1501, Cesare Borgia arranged a banquet in his chambers in the Vatican with 50 honest prostitutes who danced after dinner with the attendants and others who were present, at first in their garments, then without their garments. After dinner, the candelabra with the burning candles were taken from the tables and placed on the floor, and chestnuts were strewn around, which the naked courtesans picked up, creeping on hands and knees between the chandeliers, while the Pope Cesare and his sister Lucrezia looked on, and so on. Okay. So, yeah, this was a kind of, let's not put that on the screen. Yeah, this was kind of normal for popes. Let's see some more, shall we? List of sexually active popes. Popes who were legally married, blah, blah. That's fine. Okay, that's fine, I suppose. Fathered illegitimate children before holy orders. Pius II, Innocent the Eighth, Clement the Seventh. Relationship with a servant or slave girl. Sad. These are popes, okay? All these are popes. Known to or suspected of having fathered illegitimate children after receiving holy orders. Julius II, he had 3 daughters as offspring. Paul III, not married. Sylvia Ruffini as mistress. Pius IV, Gregory VIII, Leo VII, the 12th. Popes alleged to be sexually active during pontificate while being popes. Sergius III, John, he had affairs with multiple ladies. John X. John XII, also accused of adultery and even worse, I suppose. He had a collection of women. Alexander VI, yeah, okay, long affair with Vanazza del Catanei and so on and so forth. Relationships with men, of course, naturally. Relationships with men. Paul II, Sixtus IV, Leo X, Julius III, affair with ennobled cardinal, Paul VI, okay, Paolo Carlini, okay, fantastic, good for you. Relationships with women and men, Benedict IX, and so much more, so much more. So this is part of the tradition, I suppose. If you read more about the church, the Catholic Church, the Vatican Church, you will find that allegedly most of the cardinals and priests are today homosexuals. And I suppose in Christianity, homosexuality is a sin, right? So how does it work? I'm not really sure how it works, but so I think this Epstein case is nothing. This far from unique. Far from unique. Okay, we have spent 2 hours doing this. Let's take a couple more, then I'll go into the live chat, super chat, etc. Amisha says, why did King Henry VIII betray Anne Boleyn? It could not have been her failure to give him a male heir. Was it her behavior or religion? So Henry VIII, okay. I mean, did he betray Anne Boleyn? I mean, he had her head chopped off, so she was his wife, right? So he had her head chopped off. So you could say he did betray his wife. Was it because? So you were saying that it could not have been because of her failure to give him a male heir, a son. Was it her behavior? Was it her religion? Look, if you look at Henry VIII's track record, you'll find that he married 6 ladies. And in 2 of these cases, he had their heads chopped off. One was Anne Boleyn, the other was Catherine Howard. Anne Boleyn was beheaded. I have been to the place where she was beheaded, the same spot. I have been there. Frightening place. You can still feel something there. So, and she was not the only one to be beheaded there. Plenty of people had their heads taken out over there. It's in the Tower of London. You can go there. Still there, that place. So Anne Boleyn was accused of adultery and treason and whatnot. I'm sure she didn't do any of that, but she was accused of that, and she was beheaded. Then you had the first wife of Henry VIII was Catherine of Aragon. She was from Spain, okay, and so she could not produce a male child. She produced. I don't know. I don't remember what did they have children or not, but the marriage was annulled after about a quarter century of marriage, because Henry now had seen this young, beautiful lady called Anne Boleyn, and he wanted to marry her. He was infatuated, so he got the marriage to Catherine of Aragon, the poor lady, annulled, and he married Anne Boleyn. Very cruel, very cruel. So he married Anne Boleyn, and Anne produced a daughter, Mary, but no son. So eventually this guy got tired of her, and he had her accused of adultery and treason and whatnot, and along with her brother, and I don't know what exactly it was, the details. And he had her head lopped off. Then he married a lady called Jane Seymour. And Jane Seymour did give birth to a boy, and she died very soon after that. So Henry VIII had a boy, son, male child, finally, happy. But Jane Seymour died. So he married a German lady, Anne of Cleves, but he didn't like her. So the marriage was annulled or whatever after a few months. And that had a bad effect on Mr. Cromwell. That's a whole different story. Okay. After Anne of Cleves, the marriage was dissolved, annulled, whatever, divorce, whatever it was. Then he married Catherine Howard. And then she was accused of adultery and treason. And she was beheaded. And then you had Catherine Parr, who outlived Henry VIII. Okay, and she survived. She's the only wife who survived. Okay, and I suppose Anne of Cleves also survived. Everybody else died. Apart from Catherine of Aragon. Did she die before Henry? Probably, yeah. So you can see there's a pattern here. There's a pattern. Henry VIII had, I think he had delusions of grandeur. He thought of himself as a great man, but he was the king of a small, middling kingdom, nothing powerful. He wanted to play on the biggest geopolitical stage, never did much of anything. And his life and career was spent marrying and killing off his wives. So when it comes to Anne Boleyn, I'm not sure exactly what went wrong, but he had her accused of adultery and treason, and he had her killed off. Why did he do it? Probably, maybe one reason is that she gave birth to a daughter, not a boy. And maybe secondly, he got tired of her for some reason. I'm not sure what it was, but he had a history, he had a pattern of getting tired of various wives. So that's exactly kind of what happened. What happened to Anne Boleyn's daughter, Mary? She became Queen of England. She was known as Bloody Mary. She was known as Bloody Mary. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. I'm totally wrong here. Mary was the daughter of Catherine of Aragon. And Anne Boleyn's daughter was Elizabeth. Yes. Anne Boleyn's daughter was Elizabeth, and Catherine of Aragon's daughter was Mary. Mary became queen for a while. She lived into her 40s and she died eventually. Um, Mary was known as Bloody Mary. She, yeah, you can look it up. After Mary died, her sister, half sister, Elizabeth became queen, and she was the queen who, you know, took England to greatness. So that's the story in brief. Um, I have more questions, but I think I'll take one more from the comments, and then I'll go and take some live stream, maybe super chat questions if there are any. I'll look into that. Imperial Bharat says, how true are the claims of the Buddha of Buddha, Gautam Buddha, consuming meat while preaching ideals of non-violence? The claims are true. He did eat meat. He did eat meat. His last meal is supposed to have been pork. Kushinagar. He died in Kushinagar, didn't he? He attained Mahapari Nirvana in Kushinagar. His last meal was pork. So it is true that he consumed meat. It is true that Buddhist bhikkhus, they consumed meat. Not necessarily the only thing they consumed, but they relied on alms given by people. So Buddhist bhikkhus are supposed to eat one meal in a day, whatever is donated by the people of where they live. So if people donate vegetarian food, they'll eat that. If they donate meat, they're going to eat that as well. And you will still see that practice in other parts of in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, etc. Buddhist bhikkhus will eat whatever is donated, whether it's meat or not. They will eat that. So I think the logic, the rationale behind this is that don't waste food. Whatever is offered to you, voluntarily and happily, consume that, whatever it is. So Buddhism does say that non-violence is the best thing, and so on. And eventually, in China, in Japan, Korea, etc., Buddhist monks were forbidden from eating meat. Japan was vegetarian for 1,000 years. Cow slaughter was intensely frowned upon. The samurais, they were Buddhist warriors. They consumed fish, but no meat. So yeah, the claim is true. The Gautam Buddha himself did eat meat. His last meal was pork. Let's fact check that, shall we? Let's ask our favorite AI, Google's AI here, or we'll ask Google itself. What was Gautam Buddha's last meal? Gautam Buddha's last meal. His last meal was a dish called Shukara Madhava, boar's delight or soft pork, offered to him by a blacksmith named Chanda must be. It was outside of Kushinagar. Right, so Kunda Kumaraputra. Okay, whatever, yeah. So yes, his last meal was pork. Okay, so I have more questions, but I'm going to stop here and I'm going to take some questions from the live chat. Do we have? Okay, we have 29 super chats waiting for me, so we'll take that. Okay, let's take some super chat questions. What have we? Now it's going to veer away from history, I'm sure. So Sachdev says, during the NASA moon base presentation, I noticed on one slide they mentioned a number of drones that they will use to mark a perimeter. Territorial claims, you could consider that to be the beginning of soft territorial claims. Yeah, they're gonna use a number of drones to mark a perimeter around the NASA moon base. Fantastic. Even before they have set foot back on the moon, they are talking about establishing a perimeter. Right, so that's the beginning of territorial claims. You can bet your last dollar on that. Aravind Srinivasan says, are we really backward in BVR and EW tech? What's BVR? Beyond visual range. EW is what? Electronic warfare. I think we're pretty decent in BVR and EW tech. BVR is beyond visual range missile warfare, I suppose, air-to-air missiles and so on. I think the Astra missile is pretty frightening. What's the range of the Astra missile? 100 kilometers? 80? 150? What is it? What's the range of the Astra missile? Okay, so it varies obviously in the variant. Astra Mark 1 has a range of 110 to 160 kilometers. Astra 2 is 200 kilometers. Astra Mark 3 Gandiva is 340 kilometers. That's pretty frightening, actually. That's not backwardness. The Astra is probably one of the best air-to-air missiles in the world. So that's not backwardness. And electronic warfare, I'm pretty sure we are at least decently good at that. Obviously, much of that will be classified, so I can't tell. But I think we are pretty good, reasonably good in both fields. BVR, I think we're actually one of the best. We have some of the best missiles in the world. Akashi says, appalling European only clubs exist in India. Is there one Indian only club in the UK? No. If this was China, such clubs would have been bulldozed in the Mao era. Well, we are a nation of mentally colonized fools. We are a nation that is saddled with a massive inferiority complex. We have clubs in India in the 21st century, in 2026, where to be a member of the governing body or whatever it is, you have to be European. Indians aren't allowed. It's true. Allegedly, there is at least one club like this, allegedly in Mumbai. In the city of Mumbai, India's so-called financial capital, in 2026, you have clubs like this. At least one club, allegedly. Yeah. Do Indians even have self-respect? These clubs are, you have to be allegedly in a so-called elite of society to be a member of the club. And these so-called Indian elites, they have such an incredible inferiority complex that they're okay with this sort of arrangement. Only European citizens or Western passport holders can be member of the governing body or whatever the top level of the club is. India still has a long way to go. Our so-called elites, what can I say about them? You won't ever find an Indian-only club in the UK. And you are absolutely correct. If it was China, such clubs would have been bulldozed during Mao's era, 1950s and 1960s. Absolutely. Prataradana says, regarding Pashupati seal, the deity has 3 heads and its oldest multi-headed god. And Kushans out of all put Shiva on coins, but with 3 heads. Right. So this is a continuing tradition, isn't it? It's a continuing tradition. The Pashupati seal must be like 5,000-6,000 years old. The Kushan Empire, it started let's say about 1900 years ago, right? 19 or 1800 years ago. So there's a gap of like 2,000 to 3,000 years between the Pashupati seal, that time period, and the Kushan era. And the Kushans, let's see Kushan coins with Shiva. Did we have three heads? Kushan coins Lord Shiva. So let's see. You'll see lots of Kushan coins with Lord Shiva. Here we have it. 3 heads. There we have it. Right? Okay, let's see the Pashupati seal once again. Pashupati seal. So does the Pashupati seal have 3 heads? Looks like it has 3 heads. Yes, it does look like that. Yes, 3 heads. So this is from probably about, I don't know, 3000 BC or something. Yeah, probably. And the Kushan time period is about 1800 years ago. So there's a time period of about 3,000 years between the Pashupati seal and the Kushan gold coins. And you essentially have the same depiction of the same god. That's cultural continuity. Incredible, isn't it? Harshay says, if medieval kings knew there would be infighting among their sons, why didn't they invent a system like the king would be selected through merit? Did we have such a system? What was the system like? You had different dynasties with different systems. And ideally, it makes sense. I mean, who selects the son through merit? I mean, the father may say that I have selected so and so son, but after he dies, things may fall apart. See, when Bindusar, Emperor Bindusar, when he died, he had a whole bunch of sons. Okay, and he had a son who was the governor of Gandhara. His name was Ashok. So when Emperor Bindusar dies, Ashok comes back to Patliputra all the way from Gandhara on the Uttarapath. Would have taken him weeks to reach to return to Patliputra. And then he executes a coup. So clearly, Ashok was not selected by Bindusar. Somebody else was selected through merit, I'm sure. One of Ashok's brothers or half brothers was selected by the king, by the emperor, to be the next emperor of India. But Ashok comes back all the way post haste and he executes a coup, kills off his half brothers and brothers, and becomes the emperor, installs himself as the emperor. So the emperor can try his best, but after he dies, there's no guarantee of what will work. There's no guarantee of what will work. Right? So I'm sure there were systems, but there is no guarantee a system works. Everybody has ambitions. If you are the son of an emperor, you're going to have ambitions. Obviously, you're going to have ambitions. You'll not just sit back and allow one of your siblings to take over. Right? So that's how it goes. Pratik, thank you very much. Pratik Ji, thank you so much. Pradeep Kumar Roy says, why did we transition from hunter-gatherers to agriculture? Climate change, religion? I'll tell you why. We humans are naturally, we have a tendency to being lazy. If you're a hunter-gatherer, there is no way of knowing when the next meal will be available to you. You have to go out there and put your life in danger every day with a spear or something in your hand or a sling or whatever it is. And you have to go and fight very scary animals. It's a tough life. Life expectancy 25, 30. Some days, no food. Other days, feast. Feast or famine. There was a life. You are lucky if you reach the age of 30. Tough, really, really tough life. Now, agriculture. Once you discover that you put the seed in the ground, it sprouts and gives rise to new plants, which give you more seeds. That was a breakthrough. Whenever it happened. In India, probably 16, 17,000 years ago. Okay, in the subcontinent. Once you discover that, you realize if you just plant crops and cycle the crops, then you never have to go and put your life in danger fighting scary, frightening beasts. You never have to have a situation of feast or famine. You have a guaranteed stock and supply of food. And your life expectancy shoots up from 25, 30 to 60s, 70s potentially. It's a no-brainer. It has nothing to do with climate change or religion. Even in cold climates in the subcontinent, you could grow food, you could grow crops. Which is why the oldest evidence of farming, of crop cultivation in India, in the subcontinent, is from about 17,000 years before today, during the peak, roughly, of the last ice age. Right? So that's why it has so many benefits. That's why we transitioned. Pradeep Kumar Roy says about the Knights Templar, their role in the Crusades and European Renaissance. Why was Jacques de Molay killed over fake charges of blasphemy? Look, I am a little hazy on that right now. Okay, I don't remember the exact details of this stuff. The Knights Templar, they fought in the Crusades. They're pretty powerful. They were a very well tight knit collection of knights. It was like a political movement on its own, and probably this movement or this order of knights was crushed because they posed a political threat to existing royalty and existing political structure in Europe. They became very powerful because of their successes during the Crusades. And they were a very well organized, large group of people. Very well organized. They were soldiers. They were also priests of religious individuals, so to say. Right? So very well organized. It was like a military organization. And they had proven their worth fighting the Saracens in Outremer, that's West Asia. And when they would return to Europe, they could potentially pose a genuine challenge or threat to the existing political structure. That's why they were killed off. That's what I can tell you. This specifics of Jacques de Molay, etc. I don't remember right now, but overall, that's the deal. Harshai says, how many kids should capable Hindus produce in the future for survival of our culture? 12 or 30, like we know. What will be the result of population sense? Should have 2 or 3 kids, I suppose, capable Hindus. If you see, producing kids is not going to guarantee the survival of Indian civilization. If you produce, let's say, 5 kids, and you send them all to this rotten education system school, they will all come out of it deracinated and non-Hindus. You can produce 12 kids and you put them all into these missionary schools and all that stuff, or in just any regular CBSE or whatever school, they're going to come out of that deracinated and mentally colonized. So the solution is not producing more kids, my friends. The solution is reforming the institutions of India, especially the education system. That's the solution. Excuse me. Let me take a sip of water. Next. Kakashi says, is phone, TV, cars, plane, computer, AI invented in the West? All required state/national coordination, support, drive, not just markets or lone endeavors. Phones, television, cars, aircrafts, computer, AI, all were invented in the West. Yes, true. And all of this required coordination. Lone wolves could not produce this. You needed to have the right conditions in place, societally, culturally, economically, and technologically, over a long period of time for this to happen. Of course. So this process began with the Industrial Revolution in the West. And it's a long process, right? So you needed all these things to be in place. All the right conditions have to be in place for a long period of time, for a sustained period of time, for these advances to happen and pile up on top of each other. Because a phone uses technologies from so many different fields of physics and engineering. No one field of physics or engineering can give you everything you need to manufacture a phone, a smartphone or whatever. So yeah, you need all the right conditions to be in place for this to happen. Pradeep Kumar Roy says about Göbekli Tepe, southeastern Turkey, Jericho, West Bank, and Çatalhöyük, eastern Turkey. What's the question? These are ancient megalithic sites. Göbekli Tepe is probably one of the oldest megalithic sites in the world. 11,000 years old. Çatalhöyük is something similar. So are they connected? Not sure. I'm not sure if they're connected. Göbekli Tepe is in, we know that. What about Çatalhöyük? Come on. Çatalhöyük. So Neolithic So this is much later, right? And you have these, So that's also an ancient site, but it came much later than Göbekli Tepe. Anatolia. Göbekli Tepe. So this is about 11 to 12,000 years ago, right? Megalithic enclosures. What about Jericho? Archaeological site. What have we there? So 9000 BC, Tel Sultan. It's a tell, it's a mound. Okay. Right. Tower of Jericho, Neolithic walls, etc. What's it look like? It looks like this. Right. So these are all different. I'm not sure if they have any connection. Maybe there's a connection, but not that we're aware of. These are all from different time periods. Jericho, 9,000 years old. Göbekli Tepe, 11.5 to 12,000 years old. Çatalhöyük, 7,500 years old. So different, like separated by at least a couple of millennia, each of these. All are ancient sites, all are interesting. I'm not sure if they are connected. Okay. Kakashi says, can Pakistan defeat Iran in a war? India, Iran, Afghanistan should beat Pakistan. TGT. Okay, I don't know what TGT is, but can Pakistan defeat Iran in a war? No, it can't. It can't. Pakistan has only one advantage, which is nukes. But as we know, as we have discussed, as I have discussed many times in the past few weeks, That won't make a difference to Iran. If the Israelis and Americans nuke Iran, if they drop 10 nukes on Iran, Iran will still fight. Iran won't be destroyed. Iran won't be defeated. The same goes for Pakistan. If the Pakistanis unwisely decide to nuke Iran, they're going to get smashed. Iran has so many missiles and drones, they will turn Pakistan into rubble if the Pakistanis do any such stupid thing. So, yeah, Pakistan can't defeat Iran in a war. Iran is the local hegemon now. That's the deal. Trump is now on the verge of giving 300 million, billion, whatever dollars to Iran and call it a redevelopment fund or something. So, yeah, Pakistan cannot defeat Iran in a war. India, Iran, Afghanistan should beat Pakistan together. PGD is together. Well, it's an idea. A good idea. Okay, Pradeep Kumar Roy says about animism and the role of shamans in the system. In which system? In the system of animism. So, what is animism? Animism is about worshipping your ancestors, worshipping the spirits of your ancestors. And you have elements of animism in some parts of Hinduism, incorporated into Hinduism in some parts of India. And other examples of animism are what are other places in the world where you have animism? I suppose many nomadic cultures have that. In Mongolia, there used to be, the foundational original religion of Mongolia is, in English, it's called Tengrism, which also has elements of animism, worshipping the spirits of your ancestors, that sort of thing. And shamans are people, they're priests essentially, who can communicate, so to say, with the spirits. So that's their role. They can communicate with the other world, with the spiritual world, and maybe give warnings or foresight or predictions about the future to people who are still alive, that sort of thing. So that's the role of shamans in the system of animism. Kakashi says, 1 out of 2. Do we use stupid, divisive US terms like liberals and conservatives? This is only used in Anglo countries in Europe. What is so liberal about Indian leftists anyway, or even left? These terms, labels, concepts make no sense. All ideologies of good and bad. A strong nation can borrow from everything. I completely agree with you. Liberals and conservatives. Before I knew about these terms, liberals and conservatives, I considered myself to be a liberal person. And what did I mean by liberal when I thought of that? The actual definition of the word liberal. Let's find out. What does the word liberal mean? What does the word liberal mean? Liberal generally means open to new behavior or opinions, willing to discard incorrect values or beliefs or understanding, and supportive of individual freedoms. So they have politicized the definition over here. That's not what liberal means. Liberal means open-minded. Okay? I am not asking about politics. General meaning, no politics. Okay, open to tolerant. Tolerant. How is liberalism tolerant? Open-minded and flexible, not strict or literal, generous or abundant. Yeah, that's what I mean by that. Yeah. So I considered myself to be a liberal person for the longest time. I am an open-minded person. I'm happy to meet people from all parts of the world. I find that interesting. I'm not somebody who wants to be who only feels safe and comfortable and happy in the presence of people who have exactly the same beliefs as me, the same skin color as me, the same language as me, who only speak my language, for example. I'm not that sort of person. I'm very happy to be in the presence of people who come from different backgrounds. So that was my understanding of what liberal means. But later I found out that liberals are the left politically, which is nonsense. right? So these stupid divisive terms, like you say, I would agree, these are stupid divisive terms. The left is anything but liberal. The left is super narrow-minded in the West. They're super narrow-minded. There's nothing liberal about them, but they have hijacked the term liberal. So this is used in the West. It's used in Anglo countries and in Europe and in the West. And now Indian idiots, Indian commentators use it. They superimpose these terms on upon Indian politics in Indian society, liberal, conservative, all that nonsense. So by definition, anything that is that is Indian, that is Hindu, that is dharmic, is right wing and conservative, and that is backward. And liberal is good. Liberal means anything that is anti-Hindu, anti-Indian. That's liberal. So these terms are so wrong for India. These are divisive terms. These terms are lies, actually. There's nothing liberal about the left. The left is very petty, very narrow-minded, very hateful, right? So I don't know why we have borrowed these terms from the West. It's because of the Indian inferiority complex. It's because of the mental colonization of Indians, that whatever the West does, we have to adopt that, right? So it's wrong. It's terrible, and it's completely incorrect to superimpose these terms into the Indian context. Prataradana says, Afghanistan, Russia deal, and Ajit Doval in Russia. Has there been a deal? I don't know. Is Ajit Doval in Russia? Has he gone there recently? Let's find out. Ajit Doval in Russia. Did he visit Russia? He visited Moscow, Russia in late May 2026. When did Ajit Doval last visit Russia? May 26 to 29, in the International Security Forum and meeting of high representatives for security matters. Fantastic, good. I was not aware of this. Like I have said many times, I'm not a news surfer. It doesn't matter. You don't have to know everything in real time. What really matters, what's really important, you'll come to know anyway. So I was not aware of this, but fantastic. He visited Russia. Maybe something good will come out of that. Now, what's the Afghanistan-Russia deal? What's that? Afghanistan-Russia deal. Is there some deal that's brewing? Russia and the Taliban signed a military technical cooperation agreement in May 2026, marking a significant deepening of ties. Finalized at the security forum near Moscow, the exact details remain classified, so we won't know about them. Okay, that's terrible, but okay. Though the pact serves as a major symbolic step towards external legitimacy for the largely isolated Taliban government. So, Sergei Shoigu and Mohammad Yaqub. And this military pact follows Russia's historic move to become the first major global power to officially recognize the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan in July 2025. And this included removing the Taliban from Moscow's terrorist list. Okay, fine, all right. So there's been some kind of symbolic agreement, which could be more than symbolic, but it's classified, so we don't know. But I think I personally welcome this move. I would say that India should also consider recognizing the Taliban government in Afghanistan. It would not be a bad thing, right? Okay. Godliness says, after visiting Khajuraho, reading the history of our civilization, I concluded India was not only the spiritual capital, but the most liberal, all colorful, happy, romantic, sexual, and fun-loving society. And that's what we don't know about today. This is what is hidden from us today. You are right. I agree with you. Liberal, in the true sense of the word liberal, not the present day politically colored meaning of liberal. The actual definition of liberal. Open-minded, happy, all embracing culture. That's what we were. Colorful, happy, romantic, sexual, all that you say. Fun-loving society. Absolutely. That's what we were. We were a happy civilization. We were a fun-loving civilization. We valued beauty. We valued joy. That's the true ethos of Indian civilization. We did not embrace darkness and death and slavery and chains. That's not our ethos, right? Some of that is still left in our culture today. But India was so much better in the past, before 1000 AD. So much better, right? Yeah. Godliness says, which historic fort you like the most and why? I don't know. I'm sure they're all fantastic. I don't know. I don't have any one favorite in anything. If you ask me for my favorite movie, I don't have any one favorite movie. I can give you a list of 50 favorite movies, sure. If you ask me about my favorite music, maybe music band, I can give you a list of 50 high quality music bands. There is no one favorite that I have. Similarly, forts, I'm sure there are plenty of fantastic forts. I don't have any one favorite. Okay. Okay. Varinder Singh says DNA matches with the remains of empires. 35% Mauryan, 20% Brahmin dynasty Sindh, 18 Helmand civilization, 18 Karkota, 10 Ghaznavid. Never heard of Karkota Empire. Okay, so your personal DNA matches with the remains of various empires. 35% Mauryan, 20% Brahmin dynasty Sindh, 18 Helmand, which is Afghanistan, which is Gandhar, Karkota, Ghaznavid. Ghaznavid is Turkic. Is something wrong with you, sir? I'm just kidding. Now, Karkota, what is Karkota? Is what you're asking actually. That's Kashmir. The Karkota Empire was a major Kashmir based empire. I mean, the origin was in Srinagar, Kashmir. There, the Karkota Empire produced exactly one great ruler. His name was Shri Lalitaditya Muktapida. He was a major conqueror. He conquered very large parts of Central Asia and part of the subcontinent as well. Okay. So his name was Lalit Aditya Muktapida. Lalit Aditya Muktapida, Maharaja of Kashmir. Great king. And much of what we know about him comes from Kalhana. Okay. So that's the deal. That's Lalit Aditya Muktapida. So if your DNA match is what 18% Karkota, it means it's 18% Kashmir-like ancestry. So we all have lots of different contributions to our ancestry. I've never done a DNA test, but if I do it, I'm sure it'll turn up lots of surprises. So, and yeah, so it's a so. That's what it means, that you're probably somebody whose ancestry comes from northern and western India, right? Helmand is present day Gandhar. I mean, present day Afghanistan, historically Gandhar. Ghaznavid, well, okay. Once again, Afghanistan. Karkota is Kashmir. Sindh is western India. Mauryan is anyway subcontinent, all of it. And yeah, interesting. Kakashi says reformists / moderates versus hardliners, principalists, revolutionaries. Who is ruling Iran? That's number one. Secondly, where does India government / Modi fit in the moderate hardline scale? Okay. So who's ruling Iran right now? Is it reformists and moderates, or is it hardliners, principalists, revolutionaries? So until February 28, 2026, you had moderates who were ruling Iran. Moderates. Why do I say that? While the supreme leader of Iran was Mr. Ali Khamenei. He was a moderate. Why do I say he was a moderate? He had imposed a fatwa against nuclear weapons. That's a very moderate thing to do. What would a hardliner do? Get going with the nuclear program. Let's have a few nuclear weapons. That's a hardline thing to do. Mr. Khamenei said, no, fatwa against nuclear weapons. We don't want them. We want to talk to the US. We want to have a deal. And they actually did a deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. So it was the moderates who were ruling Iran until the 28th of February, 2026. The Americans killed the moderates. Now it's hardliners who are ruling Iran. You kill the moderates, you get hardliners who come to power. It's as simple as that. Where does the government of India and Mr. Modi fit into this thing? Hardliner, moderate skill? Moderate. Kakashi says West is finance, compliance, insurance, consulting, bureaucracy, not building, solving problems, just a web of rules and games, profit via artificial complexity. That's what happens when an empire becomes way too mature. Okay. Initially, empires expand rapidly and they grab, plunder, 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 depending on the culture of the empire. But we're talking about the West, so it's grab and plunder and all that. Once an empire has grabbed as much as it can, then it becomes a mature empire. Then there's layers of bureaucracy that start piling up. And there's the overproduction of elites who then grab elite positions in society and don't let go. And then they want to control and control and control and extract from the empire itself. They want to rent seek. So that's where all the web of rules, the web of bureaucracy, all that comes in. And the EU is a fantastic example of that. Super bureaucratic, all kinds of rules and regulations of what you can do and what you can't do, especially what you can't do. Right? Plenty of bureaucracy. They're not building things now in Europe. And compliance and all that. Finance, web of finance, super complicated financial institutions and God knows what, shell companies. And you don't even know who owes debt to whom. How is the debt structured? It's super complicated, right? It's all about rent seeking. It's all about a small number of people who control everything and who want to keep on extracting everything out of value as long as possible. That's the deal. Pradeep Kumar Roy says, your views about Maria Gimbuta's inner theory, the Kurgan hypothesis, old Europe, and the goddess theory and the paradise lost concept. See, I haven't studied this in great detail. She is an Aryan invasionist, right? Maria Gimbutas. She's Lithuanian or something. Yeah. And according to her, the homeland of the Indo-Europeans is somewhere in Northern Europe. Probably Northern Europe or Central Europe. And the Kurgan hypothesis is that, yeah, the people who constructed the Kurgans, the burial sites with mounds on top of them, they are the original Aryans. And that's the thing. So that's what I know of her. I have not read her books and studied her papers or any of that, so I can't say, but I'm aware of overall the contours of her theories, and I simply don't agree with them. Time-space theory says, shitholes existed on the windows, edges of European homes, and people shit onto the street below. Why do they call others shitholes now after they made money? Okay, you're talking about, let's say, 19th century London, 19th century Paris. We could smell the cities from kilometers away. Okay? For example, in Rome, ancient Rome, you had public toilets and all, and you had sewers that ran through the city. And there was a major sewer which went out of the city. It was called the Cloaca Maxima. Would you if you don't believe it, let's find out. Let's fact check. Rome, Cloaca Maxima. Rome. Greatest sewer. Let's do it all caps. What is this? Cloaca Maxima. Rome, Cloaca Maxima. Okay. Let's go back here. The Cloaca Maxima, greatest sewer, was one of the world's earliest and most enduring sewage systems. So that's about Rome. Okay, it's ancient. That's fine. But we're talking about the 19th century in Europe, 19th century Europe, early 20th century Europe. You had human excrement on the streets. There were no flush toilets. 3000, 4000 BC, Sindhu Saraswati region of India, you had flush toilets. Okay. In Europe, they used to pour buckets of human waste out of windows onto the streets below. The streets stank. Okay. This is late 19th century, early 20th century. But then they cleaned up their act and now they like to call others shitholes. That's what happens when you have money. That's what happens when you clean up your act. Then you can point fingers at others. So it is the truth, but today nobody knows about this. They have done a very good job of trying to erase this from the record. Of course, it's not completely gone, but yeah. Kakashi says Gandhi, Nehru, Jinnah, Sardar Patel, Bose, Bhagat Singh, HSRA, uh, and so on. Who do you like and why? Who have you studied? I have studied none of these people. I know about all of them. I've studied to some extent, but I've not studied their life history or their biography. None of these gentlemen have I studied in great detail. When you talk about Gandhi, Nehru, Jinnah, Patel, Bose, Bhagat Singh, HSRA, Ambedkar, Savarkar, Swami Vivekananda, Tagore, whose biography was studied? None of them. None of them. I haven't read a single biography of any of these fantastic individuals, first of all. I haven't studied their writings. Mr. Gandhi, I've read a little bit of his writings. I have read this book called The South African Gandhi, which contains a bunch of his writings, sure. But that's not a biography. And that's nothing compared to the full corpus of his writings. Mr. Jinnah, nothing. I don't know much about his writings. I've not read his writings. I know about his life overall, but I haven't read a biography. Mr. Nehru, once again, I haven't read any of his biographies. I've read bits and pieces of his writings here and there. Mr. Patel, no. Mr. Bose, I think. Okay, if you were to ask me, who do I like the most out of all these people? Then, before I answer, let me say no disrespect to any of them. Who do I like the most? I like Mr. Bose the most. Subhash Chandra Bose. I would say I like him the most. And I need to study him more than I have so far. I have done podcasts with authors who have written extensively about him. Anuj Dar, Chandrachur Ghosh. I would really like to get to the bottom of the mystery of what happened with Mr. Bose. So if you were to ask me to choose one person that I like the most, I would say it is Subhash Chandra Bose. And once again, no disrespect intended to any of the other fine gentlemen in this list. Okay. Why Mr. Bose? Because he gave it all. He sacrificed everything for the cause of India's real freedom, not fake freedom, not freedom that was handed to us on a plate by the British, fake freedom on British terms. He wanted freedom on our terms. Freedom by kicking the invaders out physically. That's what he wanted. He tried his best. He paid the price for a long time after 1947. I admire that man the most. Time space theory says Indians steal salt banned, but same was imported from the UK at exorbitant prices. I view history as Europe before India versus Europe after invading India. Did our money make civilization affordable to them? One word answer, yes. They deindustrialized India so that they could dump their garbage into India and extract money out of India. When they came to India, okay, until the 1700s, India accounted for more than a third of the entire world's GDP. India was the largest economy on the planet. Why was it so? It was a fully industrialized civilization. You had every 18th century industry you could imagine in India. Everything. Nobody was jobless. There was no joblessness in India. Everybody had an occupation. Every family knew exactly where it fit into the economy. Everybody had a business or an industry that they were part of. Everybody had a family occupation. There was no question about when I grow up, what will I do? What job will I get? There was no question of that. India was completely fully industrialized. And the British, they deindustrialized India. They destroyed all the industries forcibly. Because Indian products were far superior to anything the British could make. So first destroy the Indian industries and then dump garbage into India, whether it is textiles, whether it is steel, whatever. And the scam was that, let's say you send 1 kilo or 100 kilos of textiles into India, you can charge whatever you want. The government, I mean, the Indians will have to pay for it. So you dump garbage into India and take out gold and silver. And that continued for 2.5 centuries. Okay. Then you make the Indian farmers plant what? Poppies, indigo, opium. What does opium come from? Poppies, right? What the cookies are planting in Manipur? Opium, poppies. So they made Indian farmers plant cash crops so that could be exported to China, and they would extract silver out of China. So that caused famines in India, artificial famines. Indians died. The British got silver from China, gold from India. It was a gigantic scam that they ran for 2.5 centuries. They destroyed India's economy. They destroyed India's industrial base completely, thoroughly. And our money made their so-called civilization affordable for them. That is the truth. Ashutosh Malgaonkar, thank you very much. Ashutosh ji, thank you. Kakashi says, if Indian government is truly nationalist, surely foreign powers would have tried to prevent this government in 2014. Of course, so-called progressives within India tried. I would... I'm sure foreign powers must have tried to prevent this government coming from power in 2014. But I think by the time the people of India were so incredibly tired of whatever was going on until then, that they voted Mr. Modi into power. I think it was a gigantic sweep of an election, right? 2014. How many seats did the BJP get in 2014? 273? 283? I don't know what the number was. In 2019, it was more than 300. And so on, yeah. So I think it was a victory of the Indian people that they finally, made their voice heard and took action. I'm sure there would have been attempts to interfere in the electoral process in India in 2014. I'm sure there would have been that. You had social media at the time. You had NGOs in India at the time. They would have tried. They would have tried in 2019 as well. They definitely tried in 2024 as well. And they succeeded to some extent because the BJP came to power, but with less than a majority, right? So just because the government successfully came to power in 2014 with a massive majority doesn't mean that it is not necessarily nationalistic, and I would not say that. Okay, Pradeep Kumar Roy says, why doesn't the government promote dairy and protein despite knowing history and biology? Chinese improved their diets in the 80s. Religion or lack of resources? I have no idea. The Chinese were some of the shortest people in the world, right? Today they are medium-sized. The average, what is the average Chinese male height today? Okay. Chinese male height graph past 100 years. Do we have something? Last 100 years. Okay, in the last 100 years, the average height of Chinese men increased by roughly 11 centimeters in 100 years. Could you believe it? Would you believe it? 1920 is 164, and today it's 174. Yeah, modern average. That's a decent height. They're no longer a short ethnic group. 174 on average, it's decent. And I mean, I'll tell you what. Okay, let me show you something interesting. Something that may perhaps hopefully bust some of the inferiority complex that Indians are saddled with. Let me show you something. Give me a second while I pull it out. Give me a second. Where is it? Here we have it. So let's put this on the screen. It's a tweet with a citation. So this is by this says Harappan male height versus Yamnaya male height. Harappan male height means 3000 BC. The Yamnaya male height means about similar 2500 BC or 3000 BC, whatever. So if you look at all these different population groups, okay, Khwarezm, Andronovo, Lower Volga, which is Europe, Lower Volga, Srubnaya, Lower Volga, Yamnaya, Shatepe, Saraikola, etc., etc., etc. Okay, it's Eurasia, Eurasian population groups from antiquity, like 3000 BC thereabouts. Which are the tallest two groups? One is the Lower Volga Yamnaya, 177 centimeters average male height. And which is the other one? Harappa, 176.2 average male height, centimeters. Okay? The Harappans are our ancestors, my dear friends. This was the average male height of Indian males around 3000 BC or something. What's the average male height today in India? Average male height in India today. Centimeters. Today it's 165. You've dropped by 10 centimeters for some reason. Okay? You've dropped by 10 centimeters. 5,000 years ago, your ancestors were 175 centimeters tall on average. Today, the average Indian male is 165 centimeters tall. It's diet, nothing else. So the government should promote protein and better nutrition. I don't know why they don't do it, but are they doing it? I have no idea. Is it effective? Clearly not. So, okay, Stick Life says search Boeing Orca. Orca, that's killer whales, right? Orcas, fantastic beasts. Now, Boeing Orca is interesting. Is it a remote control sub? Boeing Orca. Autonomous underwater vehicle that is under development by Boeing and so on. Okay, let's see the images. Okay, it's an autonomous underwater vehicle, essentially a robotic submarine of some kind. Is it autonomous or is it remote controlled? It's autonomous. So it's going to have a mind of its own. Yeah. So our sub's going to go obsolete soon, potentially. When you have these systems, they once they start getting deployed in large numbers, you may not need subs. Of course, you will need subs for certain purposes, like, for example, deterrence patrols, nuclear submarines with ballistic missiles. That you may still need potentially. Probably you'll still need that. But for other purposes, you will have these autonomous hunter-killer vehicles. Yeah, so subs may... So the submarine world is also changing, clearly. Saptarshi Chakrabarti says, which city was more developed, Rome or Patliputra? So Rome, we're talking about, it's maybe 2,000 years ago. Patliputra was 2,500 years ago. Probably similar scales of development. Probably, yeah. Both were imperial capitals. So both would have, probably Patliputra because India was way richer than Rome. In case you don't believe it, check out Angus Madison's study. Okay, of the GDP of Rome compared to GDP of India. Let's see what Google has to say about this. What was the GDP of the Roman Empire and the GDP of the Indian subcontinent in the year 1 AD? See, in 1 AD, the Indian subcontinent had a substantially larger absolute GDP than the Roman Empire. Okay, so Indian subcontinent 33.75 billion, Rome 25. I mean, are you kidding me? It's not even close. You need to look at Angus Madison's figures. Google has no idea what it's talking about. There's no comparison between India and Rome. Okay, so I would say Patliputra would have been far more developed. Okay, GGEZS says, you said that when India becomes the richest, strong in the subcontinent, Pakistan will naturally disintegrate. Is that true? We need to get our money up. Oh yeah, I've said that, and I stand by what I say. See, right now the situation is such that in the Indian subcontinent itself, India is not the most powerful geopolitical actor. So if you see the Indian subcontinent, you have Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Burma, the Maldives, Sri Lanka. Did I miss something? Tibet is no longer autonomous, so free. So yeah, these countries. So this is the subcontinent we're talking about. In the subcontinent, You may imagine that India is the most powerful geopolitical actor. It's not. In the subcontinent, the most powerful geopolitical actor is the United States. The US did a regime change in Pakistan in 2022, ouster of Imran Khan, bringing in Shahbaz Sharif. The US did a regime change in your backyard. You could do nothing about it. In 2024, the US removed Sheikh Hasina from power and brought in Mohammed Yunus, some fellow, and you could do nothing about it. Now there's a new regime change in Nepal. The US is encircling India in the subcontinent, and we can do nothing about it because we're not strong enough. When India becomes strong enough that it is the most powerful geopolitical actor in the subcontinent, then Pakistan will naturally break up. I stand by it. I stand by what I say. Shubham Manchanda says 21st era India, a corruption of classical standards. I don't know what you mean. 21st era India. You mean 21st century India. Corruption of classical standards. I am not sure what you mean by corruption of classical standards, but allegedly corruption is allegedly a major alleged problem in India today. NVM says, how are you? I'm great. How are you doing? Could human societies have evolved into the advanced civilizations we see today if agriculture had never been discovered? The short answer is no. Human society could never have evolved into advanced civilizations if agriculture had never been discovered. No chance of it. We would have remained hunter-gatherers, small groups of humans, somehow foraging and hunting for our next meal. When you get a next meal, when you kill some beast, you can feast for a couple of days. There's no refrigeration, so you have to eat as much as possible, as fast as possible. And then you don't know when the next meal comes in. There's no way you can have an advanced civilization on that basis. So agriculture made us settled societies which evolved into civilization. So without the discovery of agriculture, civilization was not possible. Anuj Dikshit says, didn't the scholar or foreigner who studied in Nalanda University revert some of the books they studied? Revert. Rewrite. Many of them translated the texts into their languages. Plenty of texts were translated into Tibetan, into Chinese, right? Many of the texts were translated into Persian, eventually into Turkic and Arabic. Yes, of course. That's why a lot of the texts that have been destroyed in India, they are still found in Tibet and China. No longer in Persia, because Persia also was conquered, but Tibet and China, yes, you find that. What's that? The cave of the 1,000 Buddhas, or whatever it is? Cave of the 1,000 Buddhas. So Mugao caves in Doha, whatever. Yep, hundreds of so on and so forth. Mugao highlights, etc., etc., etc. No, not this one, right? The Tibetan, ancient Tibetan library with thousands of Indian manuscripts. What was that? The Shakya Monastery. Yeah, this one, the legendary Wall Library, Shakya Monastery in Tibet. Discovered in 2003, it contains 84,000 ancient texts, thousands of priceless Indian palm leaf manuscripts, and so on and so forth, right? That's the one, Shakya Monastery. So our texts have been preserved outside of India because in India everything has been destroyed. So yes. NVM says, why did civilizations existing in the same era develop at such different rates? What factors most influence the civilization's advancement in technology, governance, and society? Lots of factors. The climate influences the rate of development of a society. The presence or absence of rivers, the proximity or distance from the sea, that matters. The average temperature matters. The geography overall matters, whether you are in a hilly or mountainous region or whether it's flat land, right? The presence of what kind of neighbors you have, that matters, right? Do you have fertile land? Do you have barren land? Lots of these factors produce very, very different results. For example, you had the Inca civilization in South America, on the western coast of South America. This civilization developed in the Andes Mountains, vertically oriented civilization. And they did a great job of that until the Spaniards destroyed everything. So a lot of factors come into play when it comes to the evolution and development of a civilization. Now, when it comes to developing at different rates, what do you mean developing at different rates? Are you talking about culture? Are you talking about architecture? Are you talking about science, technology, trade? What exactly? All these things are different, and they will develop at different rates. For example, India was 5,000 years ago a fully urbanized, fully industrialized civilization with no evidence of warfare. So it was a very peaceful civilization, super peaceful, super organized, right? So you don't see any development of warfare or arms or weapons. So there is zero development apparently of weapons technology, but tremendous development of industrial technology and trade and science and technology. But you don't see any evidence of weapons technology evolving. So it all, lots of factors, right? So if you are, let's say like Europe in the second millennium AD, Europe was this bunch of tribal societies fighting each other constantly, and then they got knowledge from the East, ideas from the East, mathematics, gunpowder, other things. Then they started using that in warfare. So that's how weapons technology evolved very rapidly in Europe. So many factors come into play and they shape the evolution of societies. Pradeep Kumar Roy says AI doesn't work properly in certain edge cases like driving, like automatically driving cars. If there's an AI takeover, the ultimate solution to AI will be the extinction of humans, world domination for the elites, maybe. Right now, AI isn't perfect when it comes to self driving cars right now. It can handle a decent number of cases, but in edge cases, the cars may crash or whatever. So it doesn't mean in 3 years it will still be the case. AI is evolving very rapidly. Now, people will talk about the AI bubble and the AI services, AI companies are overpriced and all. That's an economic matter. It's not a technological matter. AI is a genuinely transformative technology. The way AI is being priced in the US, you can say it's a bubble. I mean, if you see Anthropic and OpenAI and all, the kind of prices they command, for their max plan, $200 a month, that may be seriously overpricing things. This You will get the same quality or almost the same quality of AI from Chinese companies at a fraction of the price. So the Americans are overpricing their services, their technology, and they're limiting what's available to the public in terms of capabilities with context windows and artificially hamstrung AIs and all. But it doesn't mean that AI doesn't have potential. AI has tremendous potential. And right now, yeah, it still can't, uh, handle edge cases in driving cars. It can handle smooth highways and good traffic and all, but it can't handle a situation like what the kind of traffic you have in India. But eventually, it'll be able to do that. Eventually, it'll happen. So, yeah. Now, if there's an AI takeover, the ultimate solution to AI will be the extinction of humans. Potentially, it depends on what. Yeah, AI may potentially see humans as an impediment or a problem on the planet, which could be if that happens, it could lead to the extinction of humans, or AI might try to do that. So, is it world domination for the AI, for the elites? Well, elites are also humans. If AI sees humans as a problem, the elites will also be in the crosshairs, unless the elites retain control of the AI. In which case, yeah, they can do whatever they want in the planet, on the planet, to the population. So we are entering interesting and potentially very dangerous times, indeed. Hivansh says, search ChatGPT Claude only answer in one word. An Indian kingdom that has fought most battles in last 1,000 years and still continues to live. I am not opening ChatGPT or Claude over here, but let's ask Google. Answer in one word. An Indian kingdom that has fought the most battles in the past 1,000 years and still exists. What do we have? Marathas. Okay, one word. Marathas. Indian kingdom, Marathas, do they still exist? It doesn't exist anymore. The Maratha Empire doesn't exist anymore. Right? I'm not sure what the answer was. I mean, that's not correct. The Maratha, Nobody denies the greatness of the Maratha Empire, but the Maratha Empire no longer exists. So I'm not sure what that was. Pradeep Kumar Roy says Sam the Gamer inquiries are rare. Iranian invasion, Darius's 518 BC invasion of the Indus Valley. What's the question here? Sam the Gamer 817 inquiries rare. Iranian invasion, Darius's 518 BC invasion of the Indus Valley. You want me to talk about that? See, the border between India and Persia, as is the case with all borders, it came and went, it ebbed and flowed. The lines on the map change. So 518 BC, what empire did we have in India? We had no empire, nothing major. So there was an absence of massive power in India, and Darius had this big accumulated empire. So obviously it's going to push a little bit. So his empire would have pushed a little bit eastwards, and the border was then stabilized on the Sindhu River. So that was what happened. It was not an invasion of India. It was a slight expansion eastwards, and the border stabilized on the river itself. That's about what it was. Shivansh says, if someone wants to see what Indian cities would have looked like without ever any invasion, they should see Udaipur. It's pure Indian architecture. Let's take a look at what Udaipur looks like. Udaipur architecture. Is it the blue city? It's not the blue city. Udaipur architecture. Beautiful, beautiful. Nice. Right. Udaipur. Should visit in the winter, I'm sure. Probably not the best idea to visit in summer, but Udaipur winter must be spectacular. Right, good. Thank you for the recommendation. I'm glad that there's at least something left of beauty in India. Piyush Ji says, Ram Ji, good to see you too. Is it possible that the monarch of the UK is actually the one controlling everything and the PM is just a puppet, like in US the president is a puppet? Well, anything is possible, but I don't know if it's the case. Possibilities, certainly. There is definitely a non-zero probability that maybe the monarch of the UK is pretending to be a powerless monarch, but actually behind the scenes controls everything. It's possible. But is it true? I don't know. It's possible, sure. But I don't know if it's true. Yeah, like we know in the US, the president is actually a puppet. We know that. I mean, Biden made it very clear. People suspected that before that, but the Biden regime made it very clear that Biden was simply a puppet. He was as good as non-existent, but there was somebody ruling the country anyway. Yeah. Ashutosh Patil says Gandhi ideology was deeply rooted in traditional value like Varna, cow protection, Ayurveda, Aparigriha. Aside from his stance on Muslims and non-violence, Gandhi core ideology is inconvenient even for the Congress party today. Okay, sir, if you say so. I have not studied Mr. Gandhi in any great detail. What I can tell you that is that Mr. Gandhi was a Pranami. There's something called the Pranami sect. Okay, so let's see. Mohandas Gandhi. Let's see what Wikipedia has to say about him. Okay, Mr. Gandhi. And early life, etc. Do we have early life and background? His the Putli Bai, etc. His Pranami. He was from a Pranami family. Pranami Sampradaya is a Hindu sect that worships Krishna as the supreme god. Really? Pranami Sampradaya. Mughal Empire. The Pranami sect is heavily influenced by Islam. Okay. And Prannath was considered to be a Hindu sant and a Muslim fakir. What else do we have? There's some more interesting stuff. So Prannath ji would invite new members to dine together regardless of whether they came from any background. He would explain the Pranami ideas by citing Hindu and Islamic texts to make his teachings connect with the background of the converts. Okay. Prannath worked as a government official in Saurashtra and traveled throughout various countries, studying the Quran, the Bible, and Islamic Christian texts. And rites and rituals, strictly vegetarian. Tartam Sagar. Okay. Pranami is a sect deriving the best of the Gita and the Quran in search of one goal, Shri Krishna. So that's the background of Mr. Gandhi. Okay. That is the background of Mr. Gandhi. You can read in detail about this. So that's what I can tell you about Mr. Gandhi and his religious background, his mother's religious background, and his own religious background. All right. Minimalist Maverick says, what if all this geopolitics is BS and there was an agreement between US, Russia, China, India, Israel to destroy the world using capitalism? I know of no such agreement. There was an agreement, you're saying? You're saying that there was an agreement between US, Russia, China, India, Israel to destroy the world using capitalism. So, to be very honest, I have never heard of such an agreement. So, yeah, I have not heard of any such agreement. Shivansh says the reason why Google's AI said Marathas was cause it doesn't have reasoning. Hence, try search on ChatGPT and Claude. I may do it some other time, not here right now. I will not be opening Claude or ChatGPT here. Piyush G says the British cannot leave any place without creating chaos. Maybe they might have planned the creation of artificial nation USA, which will be indirectly controlled by the British elites and the monarch. Maybe anything is possible, right? Today, it's the US that seems to control the world, and the UK seems to be a satellite state or a vassal state of the US. Of course, behind the scenes, we have no idea what the truth is, but yeah. So anything is possible as such. Okay, that brings me to the end of this live stream. So thank you so much, everybody, for the questions. It was great fun. It was great fun taking the questions from the comments, and it was great fun taking questions from the super chat as well. I shall end it here, and I look forward to talking with you all tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll take only super chat and live chat questions. So I'll speak to you tomorrow. Until then, take care. Keep learning. Keep asking questions. Keep raising your standards. See you very soon. Take care.